Rebirth of the Hidden Mist Village in the Ninja World. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Walking into a Trap. Even though Shannon had amazing strength, the gap and skills, coupled with Taketori Shinsuke's intention to dodge, made it difficult for him to hit the target, and his powerful strength was useless. The two fought for 7 or 8 rounds, and Shannon did not touch Taketori Shinsuke once, but was left with many wounds on his body by the opponent's bone spurs. Although with his own strong recovery ability, such wounds could not pose a threat to him, but this feeling of having power, but nowhere to use it made him upset. Not far away, Luz, who had just been hit hard, climbed up from the ground with great pain. Looking at the cracks on the breastplate, he couldn't help but take a breath. His preliminary estimates show that, if there are 3 more attacks like the one just now, the rebellious armor on his body should be completely broken. "Are you okay, sir?" A fellow tribesman came over and asked with concern. "It's okay." Cough cough cough. Luz waved his hand and coughed a few times. Shannon's blow hit his chest. Although the armor offset most of the force, the remaining force still injured his lungs. At this moment, even breathing felt painful, as if someone was stabbing him with a fine needle. Looking around the battlefield again, after receiving his order, the bamboo cutter ninjas had stopped attacking the reformists, but they were still wary of the reformists, and did not dare to deal with the rebel forces with all their strength. The same was true for the reformists. Although they had temporarily ceased fighting, they did not dare to resist the third-party enemy with all their strength. For a while, the bamboo cutter clan and the entire reformists were suppressed by the rebel forces that suddenly attacked. At this moment, a familiar female voice came from not far away. "Everyone listen to the order. This rebellion of the bamboo cutter clan is part of the plan of me and the bamboo cutter agent to lure out the enemy and annihilate them in one fell swoop. Now, it's time for you to work together to wipe out the enemy." Eliusa looked in the direction of the voice, but saw that it was Meditarumi standing on a flagpole, giving orders to the people below. Hearing this, the reformists who were still confused suddenly understood. "So that's how it is. I was wondering why the order from the adults was so strange. He also asked us to restrain our actions and capture them alive." However, some people still remained skeptical, because this was only one-sided words from Meditarumi, and it was hard to guarantee that it was not a temporary compromise made to deal with the enemy in front of them. Seeing this, Eliusa also flew up and landed on the top of a nearby tent and said loudly, "Ms. Meditarumi is right. This is indeed the plan, that the adults and I plan to lure the enemy. Everyone, don't doubt it anymore. Go all out to wipe out the enemy in front of you." Seeing that the leaders of both parties said this, everyone naturally had no more doubts and immediately let go of their hands and feet to deal with the rebellious mist ninja in front of them. For a while, the situation that was originally suppressed by the reformists began to rebound faintly. "Damn it, you dare to fool us." Hearing the same words, Shannon and the high-level leaders of the rebels were immediately furious. But after the anger, only fear remained in their hearts. Because the second and first columns of the reformists who were left behind by them had caught up, blocked their retreat, and trapped them in the reformist camp. Originally, if the Taketori clan really turned against the reformists, they would naturally be able to take advantage of the chaos to defeat their base camp in one fell swoop and kill Meditarumi. But now the Taketori clan and the reformists have jointly directed a big drama, which has trapped them in a tight siege. Going forward, it is difficult to break through the blockade of the third column of the reformists and the Taketori clan, who have eliminated the misunderstanding and are united as one. Later, they were blocked by the second and first columns. They have fallen into a desperate situation without knowing it. I thought I could be a fisherman, but who would have thought that I would become a little snake that was led out of the hiding hole? But now that things have come to this, it is useless to say anything. Only by fighting with all their might and killing the reformist leader Meditarumi and the acting patriarch of the Taketori clan, Taketori Rokuze, can this war end and everyone have a chance of survival. Kill them, kill them. Then, amid the shouts and urgings of many rebel leaders, Countless ninjas surrounded and killed the two. At this moment, the ninjas on the rebel side were completely ruthless, like a beast in despair, waving their claws and teeth to open a way out. On the other side, the conservatives and neutrals did not make any trouble this time, and finally arrived at the city under the powerful firepower on the protective wall. At the same time, they also learned about the changes on the reformist side. Originally, when they heard that the reformists had given up the siege, they wanted to retreat again, but after hearing that the rebel forces led the elite to take the initiative to kill and raid the reformist camp, they couldn't help but gloat over the misfortune and wanted to continue the siege. Because the elite troops were transferred out, the guards on the city wall would naturally be weakened a lot, which was their opportunity. As for whether the reformists could stop the attack, and whether they would suffer too much loss, this was not within their consideration at all. They even hoped that Meditarumi would be killed by the rebels. By then, the leaderless reformists would naturally lose strength, and would not be a concern. In this way, with different thoughts, the conservatives and neutrals began to formally try to attack the city. In the city, the rescue team that had been paying attention to the situation outside finally received the news of the formal attack outside. "My lord, we can finally take you home," Taketori Fujitsu said excitedly to the old patriarch beside him. "Well, we can finally go back." The old patriarch also had a happy smile on his face. "Let's go." Then, Taketori Fujitsu called out and immediately led a group of people along the sewer pipe to the southeast. He clearly remembered that it was the direction of the reformist siege. But just halfway through, the perception ninja responsible for exploring the way suddenly stopped everyone. "Wait. Have you discovered the enemy?" Fujitsu stopped and asked solemnly. "No, it's not." The sensing ninja shook his head and said seriously, "The southeast wall is very calm. I don't sense any battle fluctuations." Everyone was stunned. No battle fluctuations. That means the reformists did not attack the city. If they rush over Ashley, they may fall into a trap. Although the seal of burning heart and boiling blood on the old patriarch has been sealed with Yingquan Duan Liu, it cannot completely block the caster's perception. Once you enter a certain range of the caster, the other party will still sense your specific location. By then, your whereabouts will be exposed, and facing the huge guard force on the wall, they will not even have a chance to escape. Therefore, leaving during the chaos of the siege is their best choice. Chapter 202, Fierce Fighting in the Camp, Part 1. Let's wait a little longer. The old patriarch sighed, and said with disappointment, "It's too quiet outside. It's too dangerous to go out, Ashley. For everyone's safety, let's wait a little longer. I've survived for more than 2 years. I don't mind a little more time." Hearing this, Fujitsu had no choice but to nod. "Well, okay." Then, he led his group to retreat again, away from the city wall again. At this time of war, the caster of the curse on the old patriarch must be on the city wall. Staying away from the city wall can reduce the possibility of them being discovered. In the camp of the reformists, the rebels and the reformists are still fighting fiercely. Although the number of mist ninjas on the rebel side is less than that of the reformists, their average quality is higher. For this raid, the rebel forces led by the Wind and Snow clan have already invested their most elite ninjas here. Therefore, the battle between the two sides cannot be ended in a short time. However, the rebels only occupy a quarter of the territory of Mist Village. Whether in terms of population or economy, they cannot compare with the combined strength of the three parties. This group of elite soldiers is not much compared to the total number of the three reformist factions, but for the rebels, it is the essence of all their assets. If these elite soldiers are lost here this time, they will no longer be able to stop the joint attack of the three reformist factions. For this reason, their resistance is extremely fierce. For a while, the battle in the camp was extremely tragic. At this time, seeing that Meditarumi was besieged not far away, and was avoiding the enemy's attack in a panic, Eliuze kicked the enemy in front of him, and said to his confidant behind him, "Shinsuke Jonin, do you have enough chakra?" "About half." "Why do you ask this?" Also forcing the enemy back, Taketori Shinsuke approached carefully and asked, "The situation over there is not very good. We will go over to help, and by the way, let you put on a set of armor for her to defend herself." The enemy rushed over again, and Ryuze replied while fighting. "Okay, no problem." Taketori Shinsuke nodded, then took out a soldier's ration pill from his pocket and stuffed it into his mouth. As the ration pills were chewed, a light salty taste spread out. After swallowing them, a hot current came out of his stomach and slowly penetrated into his blood vessels and meridians. His chakra was slowly recovering. The rebellious Mist ninjutsu also heard the conversation between the two, immediately stepped up their offensive, trying to hold the two back so that they could not join up with Terumi Mei. Unfortunately, Rokuze and the other man had the rebellion armor on them, which was unparalleled in defense and could not be broken by ordinary people. Even though the two were only physical ninjas, they were not hurt at all after being attacked several times by long-range ninjutsu. "Let's go." Then, Rokuze called out, as if he had completely forgotten the enemy in front of him, and rushed towards the direction where Terumi Mei was, allowing the other party to take the opportunity to cut him several times without turning back. With the rebellion armor, he didn't need to worry too much, especially at this time of racing against time. "Yes." Taketori Shinsuke responded, also gave up the enemy in front of him, and followed closely. "Stop them, don't let them join up with Mei Terumi." Seeing that he couldn't hold the two back, the abandoned rebel Mist Ninja shouted to his companions in front of him. Hearing this, the rebel Mist Ninjas who had already dealt with the enemies in front of them, or were looking for opponents, immediately looked over and stared at the two people who were moving quickly on the battlefield. "Kill." Without any extra words, they immediately rushed towards Ryuze and the other two. Ice release. Ice Spike, a senior ninja from the Snow clan, quickly formed a seal, and then 7 or 8 huge ice spikes nearly 3 feet long condensed behind him out of thin air. Then he waved his hand, and the several ice spikes were projected towards Ryuze and the other two. Ryuze hurriedly dodged when he saw it, but he couldn't dodge them all in a hurry. Ding. There was only a crisp sound, and one of the ice spikes nailed his chest, and his momentum of accelerating forward was also stopped. Fortunately, he was protected by the rebellious armor, so it was not a big deal, but he was suddenly nailed for a while, and his chest couldn't help but hurt a little. Following closely behind him, Taketori Shinsuke was also in the shooting range of the ice spikes, but this Jonin, with his superb physical skills, smashed the ice spikes in front of him with his bare hands when they were about to hit him. However, the enemies were numerous and their offensive did not stop there. Tatsu Fierce Wind Blast, another Jonin from the Wind Clan, formed a seal and cast a whirlwind composed of countless sharp auras that rolled towards the two people, leaving a huge groove on the ground. Seeing that the whirlwind completely blocked the way, Ryuze was helpless and had to temporarily give up the idea of moving forward and hurriedly retreated. In fact, with the protection of the rebellious armor, he didn't care about such an attack at all. But on the other side of the storm, there were other enemies. It was meaningless to waste his limited physical strength on such a ninjutsu confrontation. It would be better to save it and fight the enemy seriously. However, while retreating, Ryuze quietly used the radio communication in his ear to contact Mei Terumi. "We've been intercepted by the enemy and can't come over for the time being. You should try to get closer to us. I can ask the Jonin Shinsuke to make a set of rebellious armor for you to ensure your personal safety as much as possible." "Okay." After receiving the communication, Terumi Mei agreed without saying anything. Dissolving style, dissolving monster technique. Then, she seized the opportunity and spit out a large mouthful of milky white mucus, which fell on the heads of the people who besieged her like a bed of falling cotton wool. Having already seen the terrifying power of the mucus that can easily corrode refined iron, the few people hurriedly dodged and no longer cared to continue chasing. At this point, Terumi Mei was finally able to take a breath, and then while on guard, she moved and quietly moved towards the direction of Rokuze and the other person. At the same time, at the moment when the whirlwind ran out of power and dissipated, 2 rebel Mist ninjas rushed out from the front. Rokuze and Taketori Shinsuke were very tacit, and each blocked one. Although the opponent was at the level of a Jonin in the field of physical skills, even Rokuze, who only had the strength of a Chunin, could barely fight with him. In just a moment, the two exchanged 7 or 8 moves. In the pure skill contest, Ryuze was slightly inferior and was slashed on the neck by the opponent's kunai, but it was not a big deal with the armor protection. However, relying on the ability of the corpse bone vein to control the changes in bone quality, he quickly created bone spurs on the surface of the bone armor and unexpectedly scratched the opponent. In general, Lyuze still had the upper hand. Because of the loss once, the opponent did not dare to attack rashly again and immediately chose to defend and evade, leaving the task of attack to the senior ninja from the two Wind and Snow clans behind. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, Fierce Fighting in the Camp, Part 2. The ninjutsu type Jonin who picked Lyuze came from the Snow Clan. While his companions were avoiding Lyuze's attack, he immediately launched a new round of ninjutsu. Ice release, ice hell, he shouted softly, and his chakra turned into cold air and floated over Lyuze's head and then condensed into 4 ice pillars as thick as an adult's waist and fell down instantly, forming a 4-corner formation to frame Lyuze. It's useless. Your ice release is useless to me. Lyuze couldn't help but snorted coldly after looking at the Snow Clan Jonin who was performing the spell not far away. The rebellious armor is not flawless. It is composed of independent bone armors with gaps. When facing ninjutsu attacks without solid forms such as fire, release and lightning release, there is a risk of being penetrated and broken through the gaps. Of course, those gaps are covered by overlapping armor parts, so even if the enemy is willing, it is not so easy to succeed. And ninjutsu like ice release, which is mainly in solid form, is naturally more difficult. It can almost be said that it is completely impossible to break through their armor through the flaws. But just as Lyuze was about to break out of the 4-corner ice formation, countless irregular icicles suddenly condensed on the 4 ice pillars, like growing branches, interlaced and clamped together, and immediately trapped him in it. Unfortunately, if this trick is used against ordinary people, the interlaced icicles can directly penetrate and kill people, but Lyuze is protected by the rebellious armor, and the icicles can't penetrate at all, and can only serve to trap people. Seeing that Lyuze was temporarily trapped, the Snow Clan Jonin couldn't help but sneer. Ordinary ice escapes really can't do anything to your armor. However, after my observation, I found that your armor is not perfect. Just a little bit of tricks will naturally break your turtle shell. Hearing this, Lyuze's heart suddenly gave birth to a warning sign, and he immediately used the corpse bone veins to stimulate bone spurs from the surface of the armor, forcibly breaking the icicles around his body, preparing to escape from the 4-corner ice formation. However, the opponent's actions were faster than his. The figure flashed, and he used the instant body technique to come outside the ice formation and opened the 5 fingers of his right hand towards Lyuze. Water style, water prison technique. In an instant, a stream of clear water gushed out from the palm of the Snow Clan's Jonin, passing through the crisscrossing ice in front and falling on Lyuze. However, that stream of water was different from the usual water style ninjutsu that used water to impact. It was like a living giant python. After falling on Lyuze, it immediately coiled up and wrapped around him without disintegrating. But in a moment, the stream of water turned into a huge water ball that blocked Lyuze inside. The rebellious armor can block hard ice crystals, but it cannot block the penetration of this water flow. On this basis, the opponent uses ice style, which can naturally break through the defense of the rebellious armor. Seeing through the opponent's plan, Lyuze had no time to think about escaping and immediately used the corpse bone vein to stimulate bone production and merge all the gaps in the armor. This was a way to deal with the enemy that he had thought of when he first designed this set of armor techniques. The situation on the battlefield changes rapidly. There has never been an invincible technique, only an invincible person. Even the invincible Ten-Tails Jinchuriki in his previous life was found to be cracked by others, not to mention his rebellious armor. Therefore, he had considered very early that this kind of problem of being targeted by others might occur in the battle, but as long as the corpse bone vein was used in time to stimulate the production of bone and merge the gaps in the armor, there would be no problem. Although this temporary bone production cannot compare to more sophisticated armor, the gaps in the armor itself are relatively small, and most of them are covered and hidden. Using this temporary filling method is still enough to deal with most difficulties. Now let's see how you die. Seeing that Luz was completely sealed in the water prison, the Snow Clan Jonin was very proud, but he still did not forget to perform the technique to launch a decisive kill. Ice release, ice coffin killing. As he injected the cold air transformed by chakra into the water prison, the originally gentle water flow suddenly solidified and became harder than stone. However, this move was different from the previous ones. It was a move that used the power of ice expansion to crush people. To this end, he first condensed the outer perimeter of the water prison to form a confined space and then continued to freeze it inward. In this way, the power of ice crystal expansion could not be released outward, but could only be turned to the limited space inside to gather. If an ordinary person was hit by this move, he would be crushed to death inside. But the armor of the Taketori clan was too strong, and this move could not crush the opponent at all. For this reason, he deliberately released the water escape in advance, allowing the water to penetrate the armor, and then use the power of ice escape to freeze it, so that he could bypass the armor's defense and kill the target from the inside. Just when he thought he had succeeded, a strange sound suddenly came from the entire frozen water prison. Kaka, kaka, kakaka. Although the sound was very light, it sounded like thunder in the ears of the Snow Clan's ninja. Looking closely again, he saw that cracks had appeared on the surface of the ice prison, and they were still expanding. This is impossible. The Snow Clan's Jonin was immediately panicked when he saw this, because this situation means that the pressure of the ice crystal expansion cannot be released inwards, but instead begins to be released outwards, thus expanding and cracking the ice prison. I have clearly used water escape to penetrate the armor in advance. How can this happen? Looking at the increasing cracks, he couldn't help but shout out. Soon, the cracks covered the entire ice prison, and the originally solidified ice prison seemed to have reached its limit and completely shattered with a roar. And at this time Liu's intact figure appeared in his eyes again. Silently unfastening the gap fusion of the armor, Liu moved his somewhat stiff limbs and sneered. Do you think that the flaws you can think of, we as creators can't think of? How naive. Before he finished speaking, he immediately used the instant body technique to rush towards his opponent. Thanks to the opponent's killer move, the countless ice spikes that originally trapped him outside had been destroyed. He easily rushed out of the four-corner ice formation and came to the Snow Clan's Jonin. As if he still hadn't recovered from the blow just now, the Snow Clan's Jonin's reaction was a little slow, and at this critical moment, a slow reaction is the difference between life and death. Willow Dance Liu gave birth to two bone spurs from his palms and launched a rapid combo at the enemy in front of him. The Snow Clan's Jonin had no way to avoid it and could only respond hastily with his own physical skills, but after blocking 3 attacks in a row, he could no longer keep up with Liu's speed and was hit in the chest by the 4th attack. The bone spur pierced into his chest, and the intense pain made him scream out immediately. And with this shout, the strength he originally used to resist seemed to be vented, and he completely lost the will to resist. Kai. Liu's attack was faster than the other, using the bone spurs that proliferated in his joints to continuously greet the opponent's body, just like hitting a sandbag. Seeing that, blood kept pouring out of the opponent's body, soaking his clothes. Chapter 204, Fierce Fighting in the Camp, Part 2. Another Taijutsu type Jonin, who was surprised by the sudden reversal of the situation, finally came to his senses. Without thinking too much, he turned sideways and rushed towards Liu's, trying to save his companion. You overestimate your own abilities. Liu noticed the opponent's movements, but did not stop the combo. Instead, he secretly concentrated chakra on his shoulders and waist. At the moment, when the Taijutsu type Jonin was about to hit him, he suddenly activated the corpse bone vein, and several sharp bone spurs appeared on his shoulders and waist. Kai. The man didn't react at all, and the whole person hit the bone spurs, just like committing suicide, and was pierced through by the bone spurs. However, because of the force of his collision, Liu's offensive was interrupted, and he flew out with the opponent. However, the opponent's purpose of rescue was not achieved after all. The Snow Clan Jonin who was hit by Liu's willow dance combo was pierced all over his body by bone spurs, and even his internal organs were severely damaged. He couldn't survive at all. Winter. With a muffled sound, Liu's and the Taijutsu Jonin who was pierced in his body fell to the ground, rolling several times before stopping. At this time, the Jonin who was pierced by the bone spur was already dying. Looking at Liu's who was so close, he couldn't say anything, only blood kept flowing out of his mouth. You overestimate your own abilities. He snorted again, and Liu's silently put away the bone spur, got rid of the enemy who was pressing on him, and climbed up from the ground. At this time, Taketori Shinsuke had also dealt with his two opponents, and had officially joined up with Terumi Medi who was approaching. Corpse Vein Rebellious Armor 42 hand seals were completed in one go, and then he condensed the chakra in his palm, and then gently placed it on Terumi Medi's shoulder. Then, under the control of the Corpse Vein, countless bones grew out of his palm, turned into bone armor attached to Terumi Medi's shoulder, and quickly expanded in all directions. When the bone armor completely covered Terumi, the constantly changing form was completely stable, and turned into a bone armor exactly like this. However, Terumi was tall, and the armor looked slimmer on her compared to the more robust bamboo cutter ninja. It feels good. This strong sense of security is really fascinating. Looking at the exquisite armor on her body, Terumi couldn't help but exclaimed. This was her first time to experience the rebellious armor of the Bamboo Cutter clan, and she finally felt how powerful the armor on her body was. It was definitely not something that could be destroyed by ordinary attacks. At this moment, two Jonins in front of her launched a long-range ninjutsu attack on her. Lightning style, lightning light water style, water break wave in an instant, a beam of pale blue lightning, and a high-pressure water stream shot towards her. Having already seen the scene of the bamboo cutter ninja using armor to block the enemy's attack, she also opened her right hand with a hint of curiosity and eagerness to try blocking it in front of her. Boom. The high-pressure water flow and the extremely penetrating lightning mixed together and hit the palm of her right hand directly. However, even if the two Jonin cast the spell at the same time, they could not blast her armor open. Instead, they were blocked by the armor's stronger defensive ability. However, the simultaneous attack of the two Jonins was not completely useless. At least in terms of strength, they completely overwhelmed Terumi Medi, who was immediately pushed out by the power of the two ninjutsu. Good stuff. It's really good stuff. Now, I'm more and more looking forward to the chakra mode we are developing. When the power of the opponent's ninjutsu was exhausted, Terumi Medi was excited to regain her footing. Only after experiencing this extreme defensive ability in person, can you truly understand its power and desire to obtain its ability. To be honest, I'm looking forward to it too. Liu's walked over and said, if the chakra mode and the rebellious armor can be combined into one, then he will definitely be able to raise the defensive ability to another new level. Preliminary speculation is that it can at least be comparable to the second stage half-human form of Susanoo. By then, there would be only a handful of people who could break that kind of defense, and he could completely dominate the ninja world with that kind of defense ability. Do you need help? He glanced at the two ninjas who had just launched the attack. Perhaps because they were afraid of his and Taketori Shinsuke's presence, the two ninjas did not dare to attack rashly, but instead stood back to back in a defensive posture. No need, I can do it alone. Terumi waved her hand, her tone full of confidence. Seeing this, Rokuze also put away the idea of attacking, and instead began to help guard the surroundings, to guard against sudden attacks. Seeing Terumi coming up alone, Rokuze and the other two did not intend to attack, and the two rebellious Jonins who were originally very nervous immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then, the two exchanged glances, and then separated very tacitly, running towards Terumi from the left and right, and quickly launched a pincer attack. Fire style, Fire Dragon Bullet Technique, Water style, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. The two cast spells quickly, releasing a Water Dragon and a Fire Dragon respectively to attack. Water style and Fire style. Terumi saw what they were planning and immediately understood. They wanted to use the invisible characteristics of water and fire to penetrate through the gaps in her armor and thus hurt her body. At the same time, they could also use the collision of water and fire to form high temperature steam, which could further penetrate the gaps in the armor and hurt her. It is said that the second generation of Tsuchikage of Iwagakure was burned by the second generation of Mizukichizuki Jinjatsu with a high temperature steam, leaving an irreversible scar. In the end, he could only wrap his entire skin with a bandage and could no longer see the light of day. When she thought of the possible result of this disfigurement, a nameless fire suddenly rose from Meditarumi's heart. "You are looking for death," she shouted angrily and stopped, and then began to quickly form seals, condensing chakra in her right hand. Under the control of the caster, the water dragon and the fire dragon were extremely flexible and fast. It was difficult for her to dodge as she was not good at speed. Instead of wasting energy to dodge, she chose to use the armor to withstand it and then launch a full-scale counterattack. As long as the two were killed in time, the fire dragon and the water dragon without the caster would naturally not be a concern. Then, Lyuz saw that the chakra condensed in the palm of Terumi's hand materialized into a milky white mucus ball. Dissolving release, bone-eroding rain. She then saw her gently throw the mucus ball over her head, and the entire mucus ball exploded instantly, shooting out in all directions like a rainstorm. Those were raindrops formed by highly corrosive mucus. Once they fell on a person's body, they could not only easily corrode bones and flesh, but also because of their stickiness, they were extremely difficult to remove, and could stick to a person's body and cause continuous damage. Seeing the danger of this move, the two rebel mist ninjas quickly changed their positions while controlling the water and fire dragons to attack and dodge. Chapter 205 Tsunade appears. Boom. With a loud bang, the two dragons of water and fire hit Meditarumi almost at the same time. In an instant, the entire slender figure was submerged in the explosion and the hot steam. However, the two mist ninjas on the rebellious side were not having a good time either. The mucus rain falling from the sky was too dense. Even though they tried their best to change their positions, they were still constantly hit by raindrops, and because of the stickiness of the raindrops, the mucus on their bodies became more and more. Moreover, because of the strong corrosive effect of the mucus itself, every drop of mucus rain falling on their bodies would bring them great pain. The pain made them lose strength and slow down their evasion speed, and the result was getting worse and worse. In less than half a minute, the two were covered with mucus all over their bodies and fell to the ground in pain, struggling and wailing constantly. As the mucus raindrops fell further, they soon lost the strength to struggle and wail and stopped breathing completely. Seeing that even the corpses were wrapped in more and more mucus, melting and shrinking little by little. On the other side, the water dragon and the fire dragon also exhausted their power and completely dissipated. Meditarumi walked out of the steam calmly in a grey-white armor. "Your armor is really good. I really like it more and more." Looking at Lyuz and the others, Meditarumi praised them again with joy. "As long as you like it." Lyuz nodded, and then said, "But I think we should deal with these guys in the camp first." As he said that, he locked onto another hostile mist ninja not far away, and went up to him without fear. Meditarumi and the others did not delay anymore. When they saw each other, they immediately found opponents nearby and quickly entered a new battle. As time went on, the battle situation in the camp gradually became clear. The rebels took advantage of the chaos to rush in. Although they had a certain advantage in the first move, they could not win quickly under the fierce counterattack of the reformists. Originally, their average strength was stronger. Even if they were fewer in number than the reformists, they had a great chance of winning. You have to know that the nearly 3,000 troops of Meditarumi are not the elite of the entire reform faction. A considerable part of them are newly trained ninjas in the past 2 years. Excluding some old-timers who don't seek to make progress, there are only about 1,000 people who can really be called elite. The elite forces of both sides are not equal. But unfortunately, the rebels ran into the Taketori clan. The Taketori clan has only 500 people, of which the Genin accounts for a small half, and the Chunin and Jonin add up to only about 300 people. Considering the extraordinary combat ability of the Taketori clan, which is stronger than the general elite, these Chunin and Jonin of the Taketori clan should be able to match the 600 elites of the rebels. However, this is only a comparison in the usual sense. In this war, the Taketori clan brought the rebellion armor. Relying on the powerful protective ability of the rebellion armor, although a Taketori Genin is not enough to deal with an elite Jonin, it is enough to deal with 1 or 2 Chunin. With both sides suffering losses, they had every chance to use their strong defensive capabilities to kill the enemy's elite chunin. In this way, the Taketori clan, who were all wearing armor, almost completely became an elite force. Although there were only 500 people, they were completely equal to the enemy's 1000 elites. In this way, the rebels lost the advantage of elite forces, and they were outnumbered by the reformists, so the battle naturally tilted towards the reformists. Seeing that the chances of winning were slim and nearly half of the elites brought out this time had died, several leaders of the rebels discussed and immediately decided to retreat. All troops retreat, retreat. As their orders rang out on the battlefield, all the rebel ninjas who were still fighting on the battlefield suddenly extinguished their fighting spirit, and they all got rid of their opponents and began to flee. Kill. Don't let them go. Meditarumi also shouted orders when she saw this. For a moment, the rebel ninjas ran in front and the reformist ninjas chased behind. The originally stable battle situation suddenly collapsed and turned into a battle royale. At the same time, the neutral and conservative factions that had already climbed the city wall were fighting with the remaining rebel Miss Ninja. Although the rebels had dispatched 2000 elites to raid the reformists, and there were not many elites left for defense, the number of people left behind was large, almost twice that of the neutral and conservative factions. Relying on the geographical advantage, the neutral and conservative factions did not gain much advantage, and the casualties on both sides continued to increase. For a moment, the entire city wall seemed to have turned into a sure hell, with the bodies of the dead ninjas covering the ground and a thick layer on the corners. Seeing that the situation was getting worse and worse, the neutral and conservative factions slowly gained a foothold on the city wall, and the rebel leaders could not sit still. They immediately found a female ninja who was hiding far behind and watching the battle. The other party had a beautiful face and an extremely hot figure. She was wearing a green long gown on the outside and an open sleeveless top inside, which showed off the seductive scenery. The younger Miss Ninjas who came with them had their heartbeats quickened when they saw this, and they couldn't help but swallow their saliva quietly. But they also knew that the woman in front of them was definitely not someone they could get involved with. If they didn't want to die a violent death, they'd better put away their bad thoughts. Princess Tsunade, the situation is getting worse and worse. We have to ask you to help. The head of the Wind Clan bowed slightly and then said seriously to the female ninja. This person was none other than Princess Tsunade, one of the 3 ninjas of Konoha. After learning about the extermination plan of the 3 reformist factions, the rebels immediately asked Konoha for help. Because Konoha was busy exterminating the evil gods and ghost legions, it was unable to mobilize ninja troops for support, and the number of supporters was too small to be of any use. After repeated consideration, Konoha sent this person over. I hope this person can turn the tide of the battle at a critical moment. Looking at the many ninjas fighting in the distance, Tsunade crossed her arms and said proudly, you can ask me to take action, but you have to think it through. Although I can help you block this attack, they will not give you another chance. As she said that, she turned her head and looked at the few people deeply. After all, this is not the land of fire, let alone Konoha, and she is just an outsider. Naturally, she can't risk her life for this group of outsiders. Once the situation is not good, she will immediately lead people to retreat and leave. Hearing this, the patriarch of the Snow Clan wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said carefully, we have thought about it. If we don't repel them in time, our losses will probably be even more serious. Maybe we can't even hold on until the next siege, and we can't hold it this time. Well, as you wish. Tsunade nodded, then gently bit her thumb, drew a blood mark on the palm of her right hand, and quickly formed a set of hand seals. Chapter 206 Second Retreat. Summoning technique with a light shout, Tsunade immediately jumped back, pulling away from the others, and then spread her palms and pressed them down hard. In an instant, a black array pattern appeared from under her palms, imprinted in the air. Then, a white smoke screen rose from the array pattern, and then a strong chakra wave appeared out of thin air. Everyone looked closely and saw a huge figure like a hill faintly appearing in the smoke screen. That should be Princess Tsunade's contractor, the sage slug of the wet bone forest. The head of the Wind Clan couldn't help but sigh. Although it was the first time he saw Tsunade use the summoning technique, the reputation of the legendary three ninjas resounded throughout the ninja world. Even in the land of water, they had heard of her name and knew a lot about her proficiency. I also heard that the Whetbone Forest is one of the 3 holy places in the current ninja world. Those who are lucky enough to enter it can meet the immortal and learn immortal arts from him. However, Princess Tsunade has already summoned the slug immortal, so we don't have to waste energy looking for the Whetbone Forest, the patriarch of the Snow Clan said with suppressed excitement. Since everyone has awakened their memories of their past lives, many secret information is no longer secret at this time. As one of the top powers known in the ninja world, immortal arts have become the existence that countless ninjas are eager to pursue. Now that there is a chance to contact it, the patriarch of the Snow Clan is naturally excited. Immortal arts? It's really a good thing. Everyone present couldn't help but secretly keep some thoughts. At the same time, as the smoke screen dispersed, a giant slug with blue stripes that was taller than the city wall appeared in front of everyone. It's really a slug. Everyone understood. Tsunade, this doesn't seem to be Konoha, right? Noticing the battle not far away, the slug asked the female ninja above its head. Although it couldn't see clearly, it could still vaguely recognize from the lights on the wall that the 2 warring parties were mainly Miss Ninja. Yes, this is not Konoha. Not to mention the land of fire. Tsunade nodded and said helplessly, I was commissioned by the 3rd Hokage to come to the land of water to help. Now that the war is going badly, I want to borrow your power to provide emergency treatment for my ninjas and reverse the situation. Well, I understand. The slug nodded, and its entire body, which was like a small mountain, began to tremble irregularly. Then, everyone saw that the slug suddenly split, like a collapsing sandcastle, and suddenly changed into countless small slugs the size of a palm, and then rushed to the battlefield in front. Although it has no legs, and can only move forward by crawling, its speed is not slow at all, especially after it changes into a more agile small slug. Its speed is greatly improved. Seeing that, the torrent of slugs rushed up the city wall, joined the ninjas of the rebels, and quickly treated everyone in a one-on-one manner. The conservatives and neutrals who have already gained a foothold on the city wall also noticed the slugs and immediately recognized that they were Tsunade's summoned beasts. Damn it, Konoha really intervened. Tsunade was sent here. The pufferfish ghost who was killing several hostile Miss Ninjas was furious after knocking away several hostile Miss Ninjas with one blow. The slug is not terrible. It is not a summoned beast known for its lethality. What is terrible is that it has a powerful clone ability and healing ability, which can cooperate with Tsunade to treat a large area of the battlefield. When the battle is stalemate, one side has the ability to heal at any time, but the other side does not. Such a battle will naturally not have any suspense. The party without the ability to heal will be exhausted to death. Seeing that several Miss Ninjas who had just been severely injured by the puffer ghost were possessed by small slugs, and then their injuries were quickly healed, and they immediately stood up again. Kill. Seeing this, several people were overjoyed and immediately rushed towards the puffer ghost. The same situation also occurred in various parts of the battlefield. With the timely treatment of slugs and Tsunade, some rebel Miss Ninjas who should have been seriously injured, or even died, were able to change the outcome and even reverse the originally unfavorable battle. For a while, the morale of the rebels was high, and they suppressed the offensive of the conservatives and neutrals again, and drove them off the city wall bit by bit. Knowing this situation, the conservative and neutral leaders in the rear immediately issued a retreat order. After all, the enemy has the slug's personal treatment and can completely exchange their injuries for their lives. There is no point in continuing to persist, which can only make their losses greater. What a pity. Waving the Thunderblade Fang, a beam of lightning was released, forcing the enemies in front to retreat. Looking at the slender figure in the distance, Manu Ofuzuki could not help but sigh. He originally wanted to fight with Tsunade, one of the 3 legendary ninjas, but who would have thought that the order to retreat came from the rear? There will always be opportunities in the future. Let's retreat now, young clan leader. Ofuzuki ninja leaned against Manu, defending and persuading him. He was really afraid that the young clan leader would rush over regardless and fight with Tsunade, one of the 3 ninjas. Okay, you don't have to persuade me. I know the importance and won't do anything." Looking at his fellow tribesmen behind him, Manuo Fuzuki was helpless. If he had to do it again, he naturally didn't want to repeat the same mistake. In his previous life, it was because he was too arrogant and reckless that he was seriously injured in one of the battles and died young. Now, Princess Tsunade was far behind the rebel army. If he wanted to fight him directly, he would need to break through the many obstacles of the rebels. In addition, the man was famous and must be very strong. If he fought him under such circumstances, the result would be unpredictable. "Retreat, all troops, retreat." He shouted loudly, passed on the order, and waved the thunder sword to fight the enemy again, and then retreated steadily. It is always easier to escape than to fight desperately. As the retreat order spread, the conservative and neutral forces that were attacking the city retreated quickly, much faster than when they were attacking the city. However, because everyone was too anxious, the retreat seemed more chaotic, and the whole situation was a mess. The rebel forces took the opportunity to attack from behind, and the number of casualties of the conservative and neutral factions increased sharply for a time. Fortunately, after 2 battles in one day, both the enemy and us were extremely tired, and the rebels also suffered a lot of casualties, so their counterattack was greatly limited. Finally, nearly 10 minutes after the retreat order was issued, all the ninjas completely evacuated the battlefield and left the rebels' attack range. At this time, in the reformist camp, everyone finally repelled all the raiders and took the opportunity to chase them out. Chapter 207 Heavy Loss. Just when everyone was chasing excitedly and chasing to the area of about 100 meters below Cape City, Lyuze suddenly found that the battle fluctuations on the city wall had completely subsided. "Don't chase. The conservatives and neutrals have stopped attacking the city." He hurriedly stopped and shouted to everyone. Hearing his voice, the ninjas of the Bamboo clan stopped immediately, and the other ninjas looked up to check the situation in the distance and stopped as well. Only a small number of ninjas who were already killing seemed to have not heard it at all, and still desperately chased the rebellious mist ninjas fleeing in front. At this moment, a shocking chakra fluctuation suddenly came from the protective wall in the distance. "Be careful, avoid it." Lyuze shouted a warning. The only thing that can launch a long-range attack at this distance is the chakra cannon of the air ninja. Also noticing the dangerous fluctuations on the city wall, the ninjas immediately retreated and completely withdrew from the bombardment range of the chakra cannon. Only a small number of reformist mist ninjas who were killing red-eyed were still chasing. Seeing that, several shells accurately fell into the group of pursuing mist ninjas. Boom boom boom. Bright flashes bloomed on the ground again, and violent explosions and shocks spread, drowning the pursuing mist ninjas. Suddenly, many people fell to the ground and died on the spot. Suddenly encountering such a strong attack, the mist ninjas who were originally bloodthirsty finally regained their sanity. Especially after feeling the continuous artillery fluctuations, they completely gave up the idea of pursuing, and all began to flee back in panic. Without the pursuit of the reformists, the rebel ninjas who broke through the siege finally breathed a sigh of relief, and then returned to the city smoothly with the help of their companions on the wall. Seeing this, Terumi Mei also formally ordered to stop the pursuit, and ordered everyone to return to the camp. Report to the adults. The first column lost a lot of losses in this battle, because of the loss of command. In addition to our own ninjas, there are only nearly 100 people left. Taketori Shinsuke, who had finished the inventory, came to Lyuze and reported. Only nearly 100 are left. This is really a headache. Lyuze scratched his head, very distressed, not knowing how to explain to Terumi. The first column has about 1,000 people, of which there are 500 Taketori ninjas, accounting for nearly half of the entire column. Therefore, in addition to their own ninjas, the first column actually has only about 500 foreigners. During the first siege, more than 200 of these 500 foreign ninjas were lost. This time, after a bloody battle, more than 100 were lost again, so there are only so few people left. Although the casualties this time are much lower than the last time, it is not very good on paper. After all, most of the remaining members of the first column are native ninjas of the Taketori clan. If someone who doesn't know the situation sees it, he might think that he deliberately treated them differently, so he made the entire column look like this. Besides that, Taketori Shinsuke paused and said in a heavy tone, "It is the first time that our ninjas have suffered casualties. 28 people died in the battle. Many more are injured and are waiting for treatment. Most of the sacrificed are genin, right? And they haven't awakened the corpse vein yet." Rokuze sighed. "Yes. Among these 28 people, there are only 2 chunin, and the rest are all genin, and they are all ordinary clan members who haven't awakened the corpse vein." Taketori Shinsuke nodded. Although the rebellion armor has improved the survival ability of the clan members, genin is genin. Except that they can take a little more beating than usual, their real strength has not been improved. More importantly, the rebellion armor is not perfect and flawless. For example, the Snow Clan Jonin who wanted to use water escape and ice escape to break through the armor's defense and solve Rokuze. Fortunately, Rokuze himself has awakened the corpse vein, which can freely control the changes in bone quality and make up for the defects of the armor, otherwise it would be really dangerous. Therefore, those genin who have not awakened the corpse vein will be killed by others who find a way or a flaw. Keep their bodies and return them to their families when we go back. After giving the last instruction, Lyuze stood up and walked towards the command tent of Terumi Medi with a heavy heart. After just 2 steps, he seemed to remember something and suddenly turned back and asked, "Didn't our people die at the hands of the reformists when they pretended to rebel? It would be fine if they were just injured, but if they died, the nature would be different and they would make enemies." That was not the result he wanted to see. No. Taketori Shinsuke waved his hands quickly and said seriously, "Because of the orders from you and Terumi Medi, both of us were more restrained in our actions. Although there were some injured, no one of us died at the hands of the reformists." At the end, he added, "Of course, we didn't kill the reformists either." "That's good." Lyuze breathed a sigh of relief and turned around to continue walking towards the command tent. However, along the way, the wailing and screaming of the wounded were endless. The further he walked, the heavier his mood became. Although they repelled the rebels' surprise attack, they also suffered heavy losses. After all, the rebels this time were all elite and had amazing combat power. The accompanying medical ninjas were completely insufficient, and they could only focus on taking care of the more seriously injured. As for the less seriously injured, they could only do simple bandaging treatments themselves. Therefore, Lyuze could see a few mist ninjas gathering together and helping each other with bandaging from time to time. Not long after, he unknowingly came to the outside of Terum's tent. The 2 guards were injured and looked tired, but they still performed their duties conscientiously. After carefully checking him, they let him in. It was not until then that Lyuze discovered that the captain of the second column, Yamashita Shuki, was also reporting the situation. Compared to when they first met, this Jonin no longer had the spirit he had back then. His face was exhausted, and his body was bandaged in several places, faintly visible to be stained red by the seeping blood. However, despite this Jonin still tried to straighten his waist and reported seriously. "Report to the Lord. After our statistics and inventory, the second column lost nearly 450 people this time, and the number of injured is countless." "So many people died?" Terumi Medi couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. The second column alone lost more than 400 people, and the losses in this battle were far beyond her imagination. "I'm sorry, I failed the Lord's trust." Osamu Jonin lowered his head. "Don't blame yourself." Terumi Medi waved her hand and said seriously, "The enemy this time is all elite, and it is natural to have such losses." She saw clearly that there were still many newly recruited genin in her troops, and this group of people was also the most vulnerable part. There was a reason why the number of casualties was so high. Chapter 208 Last Chance. "What about you?" Terumi then looked in the direction of Lyuze. "Our casualties are relatively small, about 100 people lost." Lyuze said seriously with a serious face. "But, sir, you also know that we have lost a lot of people after the last battle, so the remaining ones are relatively elite, and the losses this time are slightly less." This is just a more euphemistic way of saying it. To put it bluntly, those who are relatively weak and difficult to survive in the war died a lot in the last battle, so fewer people died this time. "It seems that your situation is not optimistic." Terumi nodded. According to preliminary estimates, there are more than 600 people left in the first column commanded by Ryuze, and nearly half of them have been lost. Such a loss is not light. And her third column also lost nearly 300 people in this battle. Together with the losses of the second column, the reformist troops brought out this time have lost nearly 1,000 people, close to 1/3 of the total. If the enemy had not been severely damaged, and the city was about to be broken, she would even want to withdraw from this war and return directly. Okay, let's all go down, and have a good rest. Meditarumi waved her hand, looked at the watch at hand and said, I have discussed with the other two factions, and will launch another attack at 1 o'clock in the morning. I need you to recover your physical strength and mental state, as soon as possible. Physical strength can be restored quickly with the help of Binglian pills, but mental fatigue is difficult to resolve. At least the entire ninja world has not yet developed a drug that can resolve mental fatigue. Therefore, they need more time to rest in order to eliminate mental fatigue and restore their mental state. Still fighting? Ryuze was shocked and hurriedly said, today, we have attacked the city twice in a row. Our people have been greatly exhausted both physically and mentally, and countless people have been injured, and it is difficult to recover in a short time. Isn't it too hasty to launch a third attack in the early morning? Rest can restore physical strength and mental state, but there is also a problem of recovery efficiency. 3 high-intensity battles in one day, with an interval of no more than 6 hours between each battle. This amount of time is not enough for everyone to fully recover. Therefore, after 2 consecutive battles, everyone became more and more tired, and their combat effectiveness declined seriously. Now, Meditarumi and the others actually wanted to launch a third siege in a short period of time, which was really hard for him to understand. I know everyone is very tired, but this is a last chance. Meditarumi nodded and said seriously, what does this mean? Yamashita Shukijonin also frowned. Meditarumi let out a long breath and said slowly, according to our intelligence feedback, Konoha sent reinforcement in advance. They have entered the land of water, and are speeding towards Cape City. If there are no accidents, they will arrive here tomorrow morning. What? Hearing such news suddenly, Ryuze and Shukijonin were both surprised. Although everyone had long guessed that Konoha might intervene, when they really faced this moment, they couldn't help but feel a little nervous. How many people are they coming? Ryuze asked hurriedly to calm down his uneasy mood. Only 1,000 for now. Meditarumi said seriously. However, they are all Konoha's elite, and the leader is Konoha's 4th generation Hokage Minato Namikaze. Hiss. Hearing this, Ryuze and Shukijonin couldn't help but take a breath. 1,000 Konoha's elite ninjas are not many, but such a fresh force is enough to break the existing balance. Even if it can't save the defeat of the rebels, it can still allow them to hold on for a while longer. And time is the most precious thing for the 3 reformist parties. They must wipe out the rebels as soon as possible. Once the war is dragged on for too long, and the subsequent reinforcement from Konoha and Kumogakure arrive continuously, they will completely lose the opportunity to wipe out the rebel forces. It's no wonder that Meditarumi and the other 2 factions' high-level officials are so eager to launch the 3rd round of siege. Besides this, there is another very important reason. Meditarumi glanced at the 2 and said again. Ryuze and the others were immediately curious. Meditarumi knocked on the simple desk in front of her and said seriously, according to the information shared by the conservatives and the neutrals, they had a great chance of succeeding in this siege. But Tsunade, one of the 3 ninjas of Konoha, appeared on the battlefield at a critical moment and summoned her summon slug to perform a large-scale emergency treatment for the rebels, and the entire battle situation was reversed in an instant. Because of this, the conservatives and the neutrals had to give up the siege again. Hearing this, Ryuze immediately understood everything. We understand. The summoning of the summoning technique has a time limit. The same summon beast cannot be summoned repeatedly within 6 hours. So, before the time limit for Tsunade's next summoning of the slug arrives, it is our best time to attack. As one of the 3 holy places, the Wet Bone Forest is very special. Unlike the prosperous Myaboki Mountain and Ryachi Cave, there is only one slug in the entire Wet Bone Forest, and that is the slug sage himself. It is said that the body of the slug sage is extremely large, So large that, even if Tsunade untied the yin seal on her forehead and tried her best, she could not sustain the consumption of summoning the complete Slug Sage. Fortunately, the Slug Sage has a special ability to split into independent individuals, to respond to the summoning, and then go out to help. Otherwise, anyone who signed the summoning contract of the Wet Bone Forest could only look at the huge body of the Slug Sage helplessly. Also, because of the uniqueness of the Slug Sage of the Wet Bone Forest, Tsunade could not summon other impossible slugs to help within 6 hours after summoning the slugs. According to Liu's calculations, there was only about 4 hours between 1 o'clock in the morning and the time of the siege, which was exactly the time when Tsunade could not summon the slugs. Without the assistance of the slug's small clones, even Tsunade, as the top medical ninja, could not reproduce the ability to treat large numbers of people on the battlefield. In this way, the chances of winning the siege will definitely increase greatly. Okay, now that you understand, go down and have a good rest and prepare. Meditarumi waved her hand to send her away. Zio shouting yes. Liu Zen and the others responded, then turned and left. In Cape Castle, looking at the girl holding a pink pig next to her, Tsunade lowered her voice and asked, Shizune, how long will it take for our reinforcement to arrive? My lord, they said they should be here before dawn. Shizune glanced around vigilantly, and then replied in a low voice, Dawn? I'm afraid they can't make it to dawn. Looking at the many tired mist ninjas on the top of the city, Tsunade couldn't help but sigh. She knew very well that the enemy would not let them survive tonight so easily. Chapter 209, Appearance and Departure. Hearing Tsunade's words, Shizune couldn't help but feel nervous, and then she hugged the pink pig in her arms tightly. It was just that she instinctively squeezed too hard, hurting the pink pig, and the pig immediately struggled hard. Oh, sorry, Tantan, I was too hard. Noticing the pig's embarrassment, Shizune quickly loosened her arms again. Unfortunately, the frightened piglet Tantan did not accept her apology and immediately broke free and jumped into Tsunade's arms next to her and saw that most of its body was submerged in a deep ravine. Tsunade frowned slightly, but still caught the piglet and said, Shizune, I want you to go down and quietly notify all Konoha ninjas. Let them all get as close to my position as possible to set up defenses. If the situation changes, I will take them away at any time. Although Konoha's reinforcement have not arrived yet, many Konoha ninjas have been hired to operate in the territory of the rebels to help resist the other 3 forces. She couldn't care so much about the mist ninjas on the rebel side, but she had to ensure the safety of her companions from Konoha as much as possible. Yes, sir. Shizune responded and then went down to pass the order. At the same time, the top leaders of the rebel side were also worried about the upcoming battle. After 2 sieges, their losses were not too much, and were still within the acceptable range. After all, they were the defenders, and had a natural advantage. Even though the average strength of the defending ninjas was slightly worse than that of the mist reformers, they still fought evenly. But what they couldn't accept was that the previous plan to raid the reform camp failed. Their plan was seen through by the reformers, who also set up a trap to surround and kill them, which also caused their elite troops to suffer heavy losses. They sent out 2,000 elites, but less than 800 escaped. They were seriously injured, and it was difficult for them to stop the next siege of the reformers. Everyone, please talk. See if there are any useful suggestions that can help us defend the next round of siege. The Wind Clan leader glanced at everyone in the conference room and said. Everyone looked sad, but as high-level people, they couldn't use this as an excuse to escape. They had to face reality and find a way to overcome it. Unfortunately, not everyone had the ability to solve this situation. For a moment, the entire conference room fell into a strange silence, and you could hear a pin drop. After a long time, seeing that no one still said anything, a fat middle-aged man sitting at the end timidly raised his hand. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look over and focus their eyes on that fat body. However, the fat middle-aged man was already nervous and being stared at by so many people made him even more nervous, and even sweat oozed from his forehead. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva, he laughed dryly and said, let's surrender. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was shocked, and the air in the entire conference room seemed to freeze. After coming back to his senses, the Snow Tribe leader immediately raised his eyebrows and sneered. "So, are you ready to surrender?" Talking about surrender at this time will inevitably stir up people's hearts and cause the crisis of division in the already unstable internal situation. You know, there are all kinds of people in their rebel forces. The other party's words are murderous. As if sensing a hint of murderous intent, the fat middle-aged man suddenly shuddered and realized that he had said the wrong thing. "No, no, no." He waved his hands repeatedly, laughed dryly and said to everyone, "I saw that everyone was in such a bad mood and couldn't think of any solution, so I thought of making everyone happy and easing the atmosphere. Maybe, inspired by me, everyone will have a solution." It seemed that even he himself believed this rhetoric, and his originally funny and ridiculous expression became much more serious. Seeing that the other party suddenly changed his words and spoke so righteously, the Snow Tribe leader couldn't take the opportunity to attack again. After all, with a powerful enemy at hand, it is not the time for internal strife. "Next time, don't tell such jokes." He glared at the fat middle-aged man. "Yes, yes, yes." The fat middle-aged man, who had just walked on the edge of death, nodded repeatedly and carefully shrank back, trying to completely avoid everyone's sight. "Okay, forget the fuss just now. Let's think of a solution." The leader of the Wind Clan came out to smooth things over. That's right, that's right." Everyone nodded in unison, but only they knew what they were thinking. Seeing that the rebel leaders were so incompetent, Shenong shook his head and quietly left the meeting room. He had a hunch that these guys were really going to be finished. He didn't want to stay here and be buried with them. Then, he came to a secluded corner and told his confidant, "Send some people to quietly pack up things. Once the situation changes, we will retreat immediately." "Yes." The confidant Kang Ren responded and prepared to leave. "Wait." Shenong suddenly stopped him again. "Anything else, sir?" the confidant asked in surprise. "Send someone to keep an eye on Tsunade from the sky. I'm very interested in her 100 healings technique. Maybe it can help me take my medical ninjutsu to the next level." Shenong narrowed his eyes and said, if it were normal times, he would not dare to attack Tsunade. As one of the 3 legendary ninjas, the other party was extremely powerful. Even if he used body activation, he would not have much confidence in winning. But this was a time of war. Facing endless battlefield fighting, even one of the 3 ninjas would feel tired and his strength would decline. He also had the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. More importantly, the Zero Tail he trained had accumulated some power for him. Although not much, it could still barely support him to fight with all his strength. This was also his guarantee to defeat Tsunade. Yes. After receiving the order, the trusted Kang ninja immediately disappeared into the night. In addition to them, there were actually many rebellious ninjas and wandering ninjas who saw that the situation was not good and began to seek a way out and wanted to escape from here. They had already betrayed their original forces, so now they certainly had no psychological burden to betray again. For a while, the entire rebel force was undercurrent. Fortunately, the rebels were suppressing them strongly, and there was a large army of reformists outside to block them, so the crowd did not disperse. In this way, after a long wait, the time came to 1 o'clock in the morning. The rebel ninjas who had fought 2 battles were all sleepy and tired, but they knew that their opponents would not let them go so easily, so they had an extremely tormenting night. Even if they squinted their eyes to rest for a while, they had to remain vigilant and did not dare to fall asleep completely. They were afraid that once they fell asleep, they would never be able to open their eyes again. On the other hand, although the 3 reformist ninjas had a short time, they had a good rest because they had the initiative and their condition had recovered a lot. Although they did not fully recover, their mental state was far better than that of the rebels. The balance of victory once again tilted towards them a little. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, Attacking the City Wall. Attack. There was no extra speech, nor any moving encouragement. After summoning all the troops, the leaders of the three reformist factions immediately issued the order to attack the city. Charge. Lyuze led the first column to the front again, relying on the powerful defense of the rebellious armor to build a human wall for his teammates in the back. However, compared with the large army of nearly 1,000 people he led during the first siege, only half of them are left now, and most of them are his own tribe. He was really sad. The ninjas in charge of the alert on Cape City immediately discovered the offensive actions of the three parties and notified them immediately. Boom boom boom. The air ninjas in charge of the chakra cannons also began to move, quickly firing artillery to start a blockade. Unfortunately, in the second round of siege, their chakra cannons were destroyed by the conservative and neutral ninjas who rushed up the city wall, leaving less than 200. For ordinary wars, these 200 chakra cannons are enough to clean up the battlefield and eliminate all opponents. However, facing the attack of the three parties of the reformists with a total number of more than 6,000 people, these 200 chakra cannons seemed seriously insufficient. When deployed on the vast battlefield, they seemed sparse and could not form an effective fire blockade at all. Even those compressed energy bombs were intercepted by more ninjutsu before they landed and detonated in mid-air. Without the suppression of powerful chakra cannons, the siege of the city was naturally much easier. At least before approaching the city wall, they didn't have to be beaten in vain. The crowd advanced very quickly, surging to the area of about 10 meters below the city like a tide. This range has entered the attack range of conventional ninjutsu. The real battle began. In an instant, more than 1,000 ninjutsu lights bloomed on the city wall, bombarding the ground like colorful raindrops. Fire style, flame bomb lightning style, lightning light water style, iron cannon bomb. The people attacking the city on the ground were well prepared and immediately released the ninjutsu they had prepared in advance and rushed towards the top of their heads. Boom. The two forces intertwined in the sky and waves of violent explosions spread out. Some people on the ground were unlucky and were close to the explosion, so they were immediately blown away by the impact. Fortunately, they were not directly affected by the explosion, so there was no danger. They just shook their dizzy heads and got up to continue attacking. However, the rebel ninjas were a mixed bag, and their average strength was originally a little worse than that of the three reformists. Unfortunately, the last surprise attack on the reformists failed, and most of the elite were lost. This time, facing the long-range ninjutsu attack of the three parties, they were unable to resist and fell below. Seeing that, a small part of the ninjutsu was not blocked and fell on the wall above. An unfortunate rebel ninja was hit and then screamed and fell from the wall. Needless to say, before he landed, he was shot into a hedgehog by many ninjas on the ground with ninja tools and died. Seeing such a tragic situation, the other ninjas defending on the wall couldn't help but shrink their necks, force themselves to cheer up, and be in high spirits. After all, no one wants to die, let alone die so miserably. Charge, we must charge up and stand firm. Lyuze shouted and climbed up the wall with the rest of his clan and used chakra to absorb the wall and then rushed straight up. This is their responsibility as a pioneer, and only they with super strong defense are most suitable for this task. As long as they rush up the wall and stand firm on the top of the wall, they can let the follow-up troops catch up and engage in the final hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. Otherwise, both sides can only rely on ninjutsu to fight from a distance, and even if they run out of chakra, they can't tell the winner. At this moment, a firebomb as big as a basin shot towards Lyuze. However, Lyuze did not dodge, but went straight up. He can rely on his strong defense to block this attack, but the people behind him can't. Once he retreats and dodges, the people behind him will be in trouble. Boom. The firebomb hit him, and a scorching force spread out, but it did not break through the armor defense on his body. It was just that the strong impact shook him back a few steps. After the impact of the ninjutsu was resolved, he looked at the top of the city wall and rushed up again. The other Taketori ninjas were also attacked from above, but they made the same choice as Lyuze, relying on the powerful defensive ability of the rebellion armor to resist, and then rushed up by force. Seeing this, many rebel ninjas on the city wall were panicked. Stop them, we must stop them. They knew very well that once they were killed on the city wall, the two sides would enter the stage of hand-to-hand combat, and this already difficult situation would become worse. Knowing the seriousness of the matter, the ninjas on the city wall intensified their offensive. Unfortunately, their strength was not enough to break the armor of the Taketori clan, and they could only barely slow down the advancement of Ryuze and his group. In this way, in the horrified eyes of the rebels, the first column led by Ryuze resisted countless ninjutsu attacks and forcibly killed from the ground to the top of the city wall. Now, it's our turn. Looking at the enemy ninjas who retreated in fear and avoided in front of him, Ryuze snorted and pounced on them. Being bombarded with ninjutsu and unable to fight back, even he could not help but feel a little nameless anger. Now that he had climbed up the wall, it was time for him to fight back. Yanaji dance he silently activated the corpse bone vein and shaped a sharp bone spur from the palm of each hand, launching a combo of physical skills against the enemy. Seeing that he could not get rid of it, the man also made up his mind and immediately grasped the kunai and rushed forward. It's not that easy to kill me. Unfortunately, his strength is just that of an ordinary chunin. How could he compare to a famous taijutsu master like Ryuze in terms of physical skills? Ding. With the first strike, Ryuze used the bone spur to swing the opponent's kunai, leaving it wide open, and then the second strike followed closely, piercing the opponent's heart very accurately. Wow, the chunin's face suddenly changed after his heart was pierced, and then he spat out a large mouthful of blood, as if he felt that the strength in his whole body began to decline rapidly. He knew he was going to die. He was very unwilling, but there was no other way. Even his legs lost strength, and he began to kneel down on the ground involuntarily. Helplessly, he could only gather his last bit of strength and swing the kunai to launch a desperate attack on Ryuze. Unfortunately, at this moment of death, he was too weak and even his movements were surprisingly slow. Ryuze didn't even bother to look at him, and directly shifted his attention to the other two hostile ninjas who rushed over. Rest. The kunai missed, and the ninja who was pierced through the heart came to the end of his life in unwillingness. Chapter 211 Tsunade's entry. You are overestimating yourself. Ryuze didn't have time to change his tactics to resist the attack of the two men, but he didn't feel nervous at all. Just as the two men thrust the tip of the kunai into the gap of his armor, he once again silently activated the power of the corpse bone vein. Swish. Two bone spurs suddenly grew out of his shoulder armor and instantly stabbed at the two men. Because they had no experience fighting against the Bamboo Cutter clan, the two ninjas who were attacking them were completely unprepared and were immediately pierced through by the bone spurs that suddenly grew out. How is it possible? Looking at the target within reach, one of them showed reluctance and then stopped breathing in pain. How is it possible? There are many things you haven't seen. After looking at the two men coldly, Ryuze silently retracted the bone spurs and shifted his attention to the others again. Because they were the vanguard, the number of people who climbed the wall was far less than that of the enemy ninjas, so each of them suffered several times more attacks than themselves. Fortunately, with the powerful protective ability of the rebellious armor, the Taketori ninjas stood firmly on the top of the city like a pillar, and they did not waver at all, no matter how the enemy attacked. The Taketori clan completely gained a foothold on the top of the city and opened up the situation. Because of their efforts, the reformist ninjas in the rear also used this as a breakthrough point, easily climbed up the top of the city and killed into the enemy camp, further expanding the existing advantage, making it difficult for the enemy to distract them and stop them from climbing the city. Although the conservatives and neutrals had some twists and turns, they still opened up the situation on the top of the city, allowing the follow-up troops to climb the city wall one after another. When most of the ninjas climbed the city wall, this siege entered a new stage. The attackers and defenders started a fierce hand-to-hand combat on the top of the city. Although the previous long-range ninjutsu bombardment looked fierce, because the distance was too far, there was a lot of space for both evasion and defense, so the casualties in the battle were not serious. But hand-to-hand combat is different. Although everyone would also use some small ninjutsu to prevent accidental injury to their own people, it was more difficult for both sides to avoid it, because the distance was too close. In addition, physical confrontations had a greater chance of killing people, so the number of casualties on the battlefield naturally increased. Is that the Taketori clan that caused you a great loss? Tsunade, who was watching the battle from far behind, noticed the figure wearing armor on the southeast wall who was besieged by many ninjas but was unscathed. Yes. The chief of the Snow clan standing next to him nodded. The strength of the Taketori clan was already strong, and now with the set of super defensive bone armor, its lethality on the battlefield suddenly increased to a high level. And if it weren't for the obstacles of the Taketori clan, perhaps their last raid on the reformists would have been successful, and at the very least they wouldn't have lost so many elites. However, they chose to ignore a very important issue. If the Taketori clan was not strong enough, they would not be able to disrupt the reformist camp and create a suitable opportunity for them to fight. It can only be said that they are still too confident, blindly believing that, as long as they have the old chief of the bamboo cutter in their hands, they can threaten the bamboo cutter clan without restrictions. They are too arrogant. Then, let me try how hard their armor is. Tsunade took off her green coat and threw it to Shizu next to her and rushed out in one step. The bamboo cutter clan belongs to the hidden mist village in the land of water and is destined to be an enemy and competitor of their Konoha. Now that the bamboo cutter clan has this new type of armor, it has greatly improved its survivability. She is eager to test the depth and prepare for future battles so as to prevent knowing nothing at that time. Of course, another purpose is to share the pressure for the rebels. Although she has made up her mind to retreat at any time, it is impossible for her to do nothing and just watch from the side. After all, she is the foreign aide invited by the rebels. Since she can no longer use the summoning technique to perform large-scale treatment and exert her true power as a medical ninja, she can only directly participate in the battle and solve some of the enemy's high-end combat power for them. At the same time, a bamboo cutter ninja who was fighting was suddenly locked by her, and he felt as if he was being stared at by some fierce beast, and a sense of fear grew from his heart involuntarily. He forced the enemy in front of him back with one blow, and followed the sense of danger to find the direction, and immediately saw a hot female ninja rushing towards him. That seems to be Tsunade from Konoha. He thought about it, and finally recognized the person. When he recognized the other party, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Because the other party was obviously coming for him, the reputation of the three ninjas of Konoha was well known, and he could not be a match at all. However, being afraid did not mean that he would retreat because of this. It's not that easy to kill me. He immediately stretched out the 5 fingers of his left hand and pointed them at Tsunade, who was rushing towards him. Corpse bone vein 10 finger piercing bullet 5 macro bone cones shot out from his fingertips and shot towards the target. Tsunade did not dodge, but stretched out her hand and grabbed the 5 bone cones. However, the bright red blood oozed out from her palm. The 5 bone cones pierced into her palm. However, with the healing ability of the yin seal on her forehead, she easily recovered the injury on her palm and threw the 5 bone cones back. Hush, hush, hush. Hearing the sound of breaking through the air, the bamboo ninja wanted to dodge immediately, but Tsunade's strange strength was amazing. The reflection speed of the 5 bone cones thrown by her hand was far faster than his firing speed. Ding, ding, ding. He had just raised his left foot to change position, and the bone cone had already fallen on him, making a crisp sound of impact. Sudden attack by such a huge force. He naturally could not stand steadily with one foot raised, and was instantly knocked out, pressing the 2 ninjas who rushed up from behind to the ground. Damn, what happened? The 2 ninjas who were suddenly knocked down were stunned. They didn't even understand what happened, and it turned out like this. Without bothering to explain to them, the bamboo cutter ninja immediately turned over and climbed up. It was not until then that he discovered that the 5 bone spikes that Tsunade had just thrown back had actually made several obvious dents on his body. Hiss, what a terrible power. He couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Although he had heard that Tsunade had superb strength in addition to her superb medical ninjutsu, and was a ninja with extremely strong combat power, he was still amazed to see this power. However, just as he stood firm, the exquisite figure had already come in front of him and gave him an elbow. Bang! The bamboo cutter ninja was hit again. Before he could react at all, the whole person flew out involuntarily, knocking down a large number of ninjas who were fighting next to him. Chapter 212, Tsunade's Power, Part 1. After the attack, Tsunade did not pursue the enemy, but stood there leisurely to observe the situation. Ahem, ahem, ahem. The bamboo cutter ninja who was hit hard also quickly got up from the ground. Compared with the 5 bone cones just thrown, the lethality of Tsunade's direct elbow attack was increased by many times. With just one attack, many fine cracks were left on his breastplate, and the whole person was injured by the opponent's powerful force. Oh, even with 50% of my strength, I can't directly break such a battle armor? Seeing the inconspicuous cracks on the breastplate, Tsunade couldn't help but be slightly surprised. In terms of strength, she is also one of the best in the entire ninja world. Therefore, even if she only used 50% of her strength, she is not comparable to ordinary people, and can easily kill people. But even so, she only barely cracked the bone armor. Be careful, that's Tsunade, one of the 3 ninjas of Konoha. Recognizing Tsunade's identity, the reformist Miss Ninja nearby immediately warned everyone. Hearing this, some young Miss Ninjas who had wanted to go forward to test the enemy changed their expressions immediately and then urgently took a defensive posture. The name of the legendary 3 ninjas resounded throughout the ninja world. Facing such a famous ninja, they did not think they had the qualifications to fight. After killing the enemy in front of him with a thrust, Ryuze shouted to several fellow Jonins not far away, "Everyone, come together and stop her together. Tsunade is very powerful and cannot be dealt with by ordinary people. We must not let her kill wantonly on the battlefield. In addition, the opponent's terrible strange power will hurt if she touches it, and she will die if she touches it. Only those with strong defense can barely deal with it. If someone else goes up, it will basically be a meal." Hearing this, several nearby Jonins immediately gave up defense, relying on their own strong defensive ability to withstand the enemy's offensive and kill the enemy forcefully, and then quickly ended the battle and rushed towards Tsunade not far away. However, because of Ryuze's command, Tsunade also noticed his existence. He can command the Taketori clan so easily, so he must be the acting clan leader of the Taketori clan, right? After confirming Rokuze's identity, Tsunade stomped hard on the ground and then shot out like a sharp arrow. If this acting Taketori ninja could be killed on the battlefield, these Taketori ninjas would lose their cohesion, which would reduce the pressure on the rebels. You know, these hundreds of Taketori ninjas, relying on their armor to protect themselves, were rampant on the battlefield, leaving the rebels with nowhere to start, and became one of the most difficult existences on the battlefield. Lord Rokuze, be careful, Tsunade's target is you. Taketori Shinsuke, who was fighting nearby, immediately saw Tsunade's purpose and warned loudly. What? Upon hearing the reminder, Ryuze was startled, and he was even more terrified after noticing the exquisite figure running towards him quickly. He knew very well that with his current strength, he was not enough to fight against a ninja of Tsunade's level, especially since the opponent was also known for his strange strength. He would be killed on the spot if he was not careful. Thinking of this, he immediately stepped back and got into the enemy group. He had the rebel armor to protect him, and ordinary ninjas could not hurt him at all. On the contrary, he could use a human wall to block Tsunade's attack. Unfortunately, he underestimated Tsunade's determination to kill him. Especially after seeing many Taketori ninjas coming to support nearby, Tsunade became more and more sure of Ryuze's role in the Taketori clan, and her murderous intention became more and more firm. Even if it was not to help the rebels, she would be determined to kill Taketori Ryuze in order to eliminate a potential powerful enemy for the Land of Fire and Konoha in advance. "Sir Tsunade, this road is blocked. Let me accompany you for a few moves." A nearby Taketori Jonin blocked Tsunade's way. "Get out of the way, I'm not interested in fighting with you," Tsunade yelled, and then punched him. Willow Dance, the Taketori ninja who was blocking the way, did not retreat, but immediately created bone spurs on his body, and then faced him fearlessly. Unfortunately, Tsunade's power was not so easy to block. The white fist fell instantly, and the bone spurs of the Taketori ninja shattered, and the whole person spit out a large mouthful of blood and flew backwards. However, Tsunade did not gain much advantage. After a head-on attack, the sharp bone spurs had pierced her fist, and immediately blood was dripping. It's really a group of troublesome guys. Glancing at the wound on her hand, Tsunade injured the pain and pulled out the broken bone spur, then silently mobilized the power of the Yin Seal to heal the wound again. And thanks to the obstruction of the fellow tribesman just now, Eliuser has already opened up a distance from Tsunade. However, he was also trapped in the crowd and surrounded by a dozen hostile ninjas. But relying on the protection of the rebellious armor, he was not afraid of the siege at all and could slowly deal with the enemies around him one by one. But Tsunade would not let him go so easily. If you don't want to die, get out of my way. Do you want to kill him with your little ability? It's a waste of effort. Seeing that the crowd's siege was like tickling Rokuze, Tsunade could not help but scold. This group of people could not help at all, but became an obstacle to her. Hearing this, many people were ashamed and silently stepped aside. But not everyone would give Tsunade this face, especially when the other party was a ninja from Konoha, not from Kirigakure. There were still 3 people who stayed in place, quickly using physical skills to fight Rokuze and releasing a small ninjutsu from time to time. At this time, 3 more bamboo cutter ninjas surrounded and blocked Tsunade's way. Sky-kicked Tsunade was not polite and immediately stopped and then concentrated her energy to concentrate the chakra on her right foot and then stepped forward heavily. Boom. In an instant, accompanied by a burst of earthquakes, a terrifying impact spread out and the ground that had been reinforced with earth escape was shattered and it was as fragile as tofu under Tsunade's strange power. The 3 bamboo cutter ninjas who were blocking the way had never expected that she would suddenly use such a move. They were completely unprepared and were immediately knocked down by the impact, with most of their bodies buried in the rubble. Not only them, but Tsunade's kick had a wide range of impact, and even Eliuser and the others were included. It was just that they were a little further away, so the ground impact they suffered was not that serious. However, Eliuser had the rebellious armor to protect him, so he naturally did not suffer any injuries, but the 3 hostile ninjas who besieged him were in big trouble. The sudden ground impact shook them, as if they were falling apart, and they could not muster any strength, and lost the ability to resist in a short period of time. Eliuser seized the opportunity and pierced the chests of the 3 people with bone spurs. Chapter 213, The Power of Tsunade, Part 2. Thank you. After dealing with 3 enemies, Eliuser was about to turn around and taunt, but he saw a figure flashing by and already in front of him, so he had to swallow back the words he hadn't finished saying. Tsunade is here. Without time to think too much, he immediately poked the bone spur in his palm towards the enemy in front of him. However, just when the spur was about to fall on the opponent, it was forcibly stopped by a powerful force and could not move forward any further. Looking closely again, it was Tsunade who grabbed his bone spur with her left hand. Don't blame me, you should only blame me for not appearing in my sight. After saying this indifferently, Tsunade clenched her right fist and smashed it hard at Eliuser's head. Under normal circumstances, with her strength and status, she would never chase and attack a little guy with only the strength of a chunin, but Taketori Eliuser had a special status and happened to appear in her sight, so she could only apologize. Although there was suspicion of bullying young people, war was not a competitive duel, and there was no so-called fairness at all. She didn't need to have any pity or guilt. However, just when Tsunade's fist was about to land on Eliuser, countless bone spurs suddenly grew out of the originally smooth surface of the armor. They had no rules at all, just like weeds growing at will, crossing and blocking Eliuser. Kakaka. Tsunade's fist fell, and the powerful force instantly broke countless blocking bone spurs and fell on Eliuser's head with an unstoppable posture. Bang! With a muffled sound, countless tiny cracks immediately appeared on the bone helmet, and the terrifying power was transmitted to the ground, and the ground within a radius of several meters was cracked inch by inch. Under the attack of that tyrannical force, Eliuser suddenly felt that his brain was about to explode, and even his normal thinking ability stopped. Fortunately, his mental power was different from that of ordinary people, but he came back to his senses after a moment of confusion. Seeing that she failed to kill Eliuser with one blow, Tsunade was also a little surprised, because she had previously tested the defensive ability of this armor on another bamboo cutter ninja. She used nearly 90% of her strength this time, but she didn't expect that she still couldn't smash the armor on Eliuser's body at once. but after thinking about it for a while, she understood the reason. It was the crisscrossed bone spurs. She was curious why the tips of the bone spurs didn't point directly at her, but were crisscrossed together. Now she understood. The opponent used the bone spurs to share the power, so as to reduce the destructive power of her punch as much as possible. As the power was dispersed, and she consumed a lot of energy by breaking countless bone spurs, her fist was naturally less destructive when it fell on Eliuse's helmet. Has anyone told you not to fight the bamboo cutter clan easily? Eliuse, who came to his senses, sneered and mocked Tsunade in front of him. Feeling the chakra fluctuations coming from him again, Tsunade was suddenly startled. Having seen the hedgehog-like corpse bone veins, she certainly understood the meaning of these words. However, as a top medical ninja, she also mastered the ultimate regeneration technique, so she was naturally not afraid of being intimidated by a little guy like Eliuse who had the strength of a Chunin. Then, she raised her fist slightly and smashed it down again. But Liuz was prepared, and he just tilted his head slightly to avoid Tsunade's fatal blow. While dodging the attack, he silently mobilized his chakra to drive his corpse bone vein ability. In an instant, with his right arm restrained by Tsunade as the center, countless bone spurs burst out and pierced Tsunade mercilessly. The blonde beauty groaned and couldn't help but stop the second attack. Then, everyone around saw that countless blood oozed out from Tsunade's wounds, and soon dyed half of her body red. Don't underestimate me, kid. After suffering such a loss, Tsunade was furious, and then gritted her teeth, and clenched her fists, aiming at Liuz's head, and smashing it again. Seeing her fighting so hard, Liuz was also shocked. Although his armor of rebellion has a strong defensive ability, comparable to the first stage of Susanoo, he clearly remembered that Tsunade's strange power had shattered Uchiha Madara's first stage of Susanoo. If he was hit by this full strength attack, even if he didn't die, he would probably be close to death. Then, he accelerated the growth of bone spurs, and then lifted his feet from the ground, relying only on the bone spurs piercing Tsunade's body to support his body weight. In this way, the power of the bone spurs gave him a reaction force, pushing his body backwards quickly. Bang! Tsunade's fist failed to hit Liuz, but only broke a few of the bone spurs that suddenly grew next to him. Originally, she thought that she had already caught the bone spurs on Liuz's right hand, and the opponent would never be able to dodge such a blow. Who would have thought that this guy would find another way to escape her attack range in such an incredible way? Damn it. Tsunade was angry and anxious when she saw it, but there was nothing she could do. With her body pierced by several bone spurs, it was already very difficult for her to gather strength to fight back, and she could not pursue further. In seal release, she had no choice but to remove the diamond seal on her forehead. At this time, she was pierced by bone spurs, and her body was already fatally injured. Her life was hanging by a thread. It was not enough to recover by relying on her normal state. She could only open the yin seal to use the regeneration technique. Not only that, the armor of the bamboo cutter clan was too hard. If she only fought in her normal state, it would be difficult for her to break their armor in one go. Considering this, she naturally could not continue to retain her strength. Ninjutsu creation regeneration 100 healings technique. Then, using the huge chakra accumulated in the yin seal, Tsunade performed her unique skills. The blue-purple diamond mark on her forehead bloomed like a flower, and there were strange black stripes spreading around the mark as the center, as if to cover her entire exquisite body. When her hands and feet were covered with black marks, her originally weak life force quickly recovered and became stronger and stronger. Break. When the breath reached its peak, she turned her palm into a knife and chopped down the bone spur in front of her. Cap. With a crisp sound, the bone spur that had pierced Tsunade was cut off instantly. Just as she was about to remove the broken spur from her body, the 3 Taketori ninjas who had just been stunned by her, along with Taketori Shinsuke and others, had already rushed up. Kai. Facing such a sudden attack, Tsunade had no time to resist, and could only avoid the vital part of her head, and then was stabbed from behind by the 6 people with the bone spurs. Chapter 214, Tsunade's Power, Part 2. Arsehole. Tsunade was suddenly attacked, and she was furious. She slashed her hand knife around, and the bone spurs that pierced her body were cut off instantly. Be careful, don't fight her head on. Taketori Shinsuke shouted, and then quickly retreated. The besieged Taketori ninjas understood and also retreated. Seeing this, Tsunade did not pursue, but silently pulled out all the bone spurs that pierced her body, and then stared at the few people with a serious face. The armor of the Taketori clan is difficult to break, and combined with the ability of the corpse bone vein, it is like a turtle with thorns, which is a headache. Looking back at the battles in his life, the Taketori clan in front of him can be regarded as one of the most difficult opponents. At the same time, looking at the wounds on Tsunade's body that healed quickly, the Taketori ninjas were also horrified. What a great self-healing ability. I'm afraid it's much stronger than the last Shenin. More than that, I feel her comprehensive ability is even stronger than Shenin. They have fought with Shenin several times, and they have learned a lot about Shenin's abilities. But if they compare the two, they find that Tsunade is now a completely enhanced version of Shenin. The only difference is that Shenin has a body of muscles that look very tough, while Tsunade remains the same, with a beautiful appearance. However, their strengths are completely opposite to their appearances. Tsunade, who looks weak, is stronger than Shenin in all aspects. Not far away, Lyuze put away the messy bone spurs and reminded seriously, be careful, Tsunade has used the 100 healing technique, and entered a real combat state. Both the strength and the self-healing ability are far beyond your imagination. In this state, even our rebellious armor may be broken by her punch. So scary? Everyone was stunned after hearing this. They thought that the opponent's strength would be somewhat enhanced, and it should not be too beyond their expectations. But Lyuze's words really scared them. They knew very well what kind of defensive ability their armor had. If the opponent had the ability to break the rebellious armor with one punch, it meant that they would be killed directly by the punch that exceeded the armor's defense. Thinking of this possible result, the faces of the bamboo cutter ninjas became even worse. Don't forget, she also has a self-healing ability that far exceeds Shenin. Glancing at Tsunade indicatively, Lyuze continued, it is very difficult to kill her with our ability. So, don't even think about killing her for the time being, just hold her back and keep her. There is a way to kill Tsunade who has a super self-healing ability. After all, no matter how strong a person's self-healing ability is, it has its limits. For example, the first generation Hokage, Senju Hashirama, who once could achieve super self-healing without using a spell. His self-healing ability is stronger than Tsunade, but he eventually died young due to excessive consumption. Theoretically, if they just need to keep fighting with Tsunade and exhaust her vitality, then Tsunade's fate will be the same as that of Hashirama Senju. Or, using Teruma's dissolution technique, Tsunade can be completely dissolved, even the body can be completely destroyed, and even if the opponent has a strong self-healing ability, it is impossible for her to be resurrected. But Tsunade's own fighting power is extremely strong, which makes the above method difficult to achieve. If they really want to kill Tsunade, they must pay a huge price to face the desperate counter-attack of a cage-level strongman. Considering this, Lyuze didn't want to fight Tsunade too hard. After all, they haven't reached the point where they have to fight to the death. If they just take a step back and delay Tsunade, it will naturally be much easier, and the price they need to pay will be less. Hearing Lyuze's words, Tsunade was also a little surprised, because the other party knew her too well. This is not a good thing for a ninja, because the more information about oneself is exposed, the more likely it is that someone will find a way to kill him. For example, Scorpion, a rebel ninja from the Sand village and a former member of the Akatsuki organization. His ninja tools are tempered with an extremely terrible poison. In the previous life, if it weren't for her little apprentice Hiruno Sakura who used the Scorpion's residual poison to prepare the corresponding antidote in advance, they would have been easily poisoned to death by the opponent in the final battle with the Red Sand Scorpion. It was also thanks to those targeted antidotes that they finally had the opportunity to defeat the Scorpion. It seems that being too famous is not a good thing. Looking around, she couldn't help but sigh helplessly. In the entire ninja world, except for ordinary people, there are too few people who are ninjas and don't know her. Precisely because of their great fame, they can hardly have many secrets, and their own information is almost passed on by word of mouth. Based on this, she also based Lyuze's understanding of herself on those huge reputations. However, Liu's source of information is still somewhat different from what she thought. Although there are some similarities, there are still differences. Liu has completely jumped out of this world and knows this world from a high-dimensional perspective, which is much more detailed than what ordinary people know. Go. Seeing that everyone understood what he meant, Liu gave the attack order again. However, this time he did not try to escape again, because he knew that Tsunade's target was him. If he continued to run around in the battlefield, he might hurt innocent people. After all, this person's punches and kicks had great destructive power. On the contrary, as long as he stayed here and mobilized his manpower reasonably, he could drag Tsunade, the super strong man, here and minimize his own losses. Then, the 6th Taketori Jonin who received the order launched an attack again and fought with Tsunade. On the other side, after noticing the siege outside, the rescue team led by Taketori Fujitsu, who was lurking in the city, also took action again. We can finally go back. Seeing the explosion light constantly blooming on the city wall from afar, the group couldn't help but get excited. Seeing that they were about to enter the battlefield, Taketori Fujitsu slowed down a little and earnestly told everyone, "Our mission is to leave the battlefield as soon as possible and send the old patriarch out. Remember not to fight. Understood?" Everyone nodded. If you fight and kill, you may be dragged down by a steady stream of enemies, and you will not be able to leave in the end. What's more troublesome is that, although the old clan leader has the strength of a Jonin, he is old after all, and his physical fitness cannot be compared with that of young people. It is very dangerous for him to appear in such a large battlefield. Fortunately, there are 2 Jonins who have awakened the corpse bone vein in their rescue team. When they came out of the underground hiding place, they deliberately gave the old clan leader a bone armor, which can protect the old clan leader's safety to a great extent. Otherwise, they are not very sure that they can carry the old clan leader across the entire battlefield. Chapter 215 Rescue Breakout. As the rescue team was rapidly approaching the battlefield, some rebel ninjas on the edge of the battlefield also discovered them. Because the Taketori clan's rebellious armor shone brightly on the battlefield this time, when they saw the rescue team all wearing bone armor, they immediately confirmed that they were all enemies. Kill. Although they didn't understand why this group of people rushed out from behind them, the rebel ninjas still killed them without hesitation. Fire style, fire dragon bullet technique wind style, big breakthrough. The 2 ninjutsu type ninjas in the rescue team cast spells at the same time, using wind style to amplify fire style. Seeing that the size of the fire dragon suddenly increased by more than double, it roared and rushed towards the enemy in front. Soon, screams followed, and the group of ninjas who robbed and killed them were all killed. After all, they were just some small fish, and it was impossible to stop the joint offensive of 2 elite Jonin. Not far away, the ninjas who had already finished the battle turned around and rushed over when they saw this situation, wanting to kill the group on the spot. Unfortunately, although there were many ninjas on the rebel side, most of them were cannon fodder at the level of Chunin and Genin. As for the elite, because the previous surprise attack on the reformists failed and suffered heavy losses, it was not easy to encounter them on this battlefield with so many people. Therefore, the rescue team killed all the way, and soon killed under the inner protective wall. At this time, the chief of the Snow Clan, who was fighting on the battlefield not far away, suddenly sensed the fluctuation of the curse seal he had placed on the old chief of the Taketori. Damn guy, it turns out that he is still hiding in the city. After killing the enemy in front of him, he couldn't help but look in the direction of the old chief and cursed. Unfortunately, the war has reached the stage of hand-to-hand combat. There are people on all sides of the battlefield. Even with his strength, he can't break through the blockade in a short time. He wanted to let this go, but when he thought of the many elites of the tribe who were killed by the traps set by the Taketori tribe and the reformists, he really couldn't swallow this breath. Come on. While fighting another mist ninja who rushed over, he shouted to the surroundings. Hearing the call, the confidant who was fighting not far away quickly finished the battle and rushed over. Excuse me, sir, what do you want? As soon as the confidant finished speaking, another mist ninja rushed towards him. Finding the flaw and killing the enemy in front of him with one blow, the Snow Clan leader quickly ordered, "I have sensed the heart-burning and blood-boiling seal that was set on the old Taketori clan leader. He is near the city wall in the southeast direction. I want you to pass on my order and let the nearest ninja capture him alive for me. If it doesn't work, then kill him. Don't let him go back safely." As he said, he looked towards the southeast in a signal. "Yes." The confident ninja responded, and then solved the enemy in front of him, and sent a message. After getting rid of his worries, the Snow Clan leader picked a target again, and started a new round of battle. The news spread quickly. The rebel ninjas in the southeast received the order, and locked their target on the rescue team that was rushing to break out. At this time, it was hard not to attract their attention to such an uncharacteristic team. Originally, they did not think too much about it, because there were too many enemies on the battlefield. Killing one would immediately find another one, so there was no need to deliberately find trouble with the rescue team. But after receiving the news from the Snow Clan leader, they immediately realized that the team that was abnormally breaking out was the group of the old Taketori leader who was rescued. Stop them. Many nearby ninjas quickly resolved the battle and then surrounded them. For a while, the rescue team was fiercely besieged by the enemy ninjas, and the speed of breaking out could not help but slow down. Fortunately, the group was carefully selected elites with extraordinary strength. Even though they were blocked one after another, they still moved forward bit by bit with difficulty. When they climbed the city wall amidst the siege of groups of rebel ninjas, Ryuze, who was leading 6 Jonins to fight Tsunade, also noticed them. Huh? Who is that? Ryuze was a little confused. There were 11 people in the group, all covered in a layer of bone armor, and his face could not be seen at all, so he could not tell the identity of the other party. However, seeing that 2 of them used the ability of corpse bone veins to kill the enemy, he could still roughly determine that they were his people. Zio shutting, but why did they come from that direction? Ryuze was a little confused after slightly withdrawing from the battle circle, because he noticed that the group of people came out from behind the rebels, as if they were breaking through. Wait, breaking through? Thinking of this, Ryuze's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration, as if he realized something. At this moment, an angry female voice suddenly exploded in his ears. "You dare to be distracted while fighting with me? You are looking for death." Feeling underestimated, Tsunade was immediately furious. Like Shenning, she majored in medical ninjutsu, but she was a little lacking in physical skills. It was okay for her to encounter ordinary physical enemies, relying on her own strange strength. But when she met the famous physical family like the Taketori clan, this weakness would be exposed. Several Taketori Jonins fought with her for a long time, but they never fought her head on, and chose to dodge as much as possible. Even if she occasionally caught a few flaws and took the opportunity to hit the enemy, she could not kill them with one blow because of the powerful defense of the rebellious armor. What made her even more annoyed was that even though she had finally beaten the opponent's armor to the brink of breaking, it was immediately restored by the opponent's corpse vein. This feeling of having power, but nowhere to use it, almost made her crazy. Especially when she saw Luz withdraw from the battle circle and still had the energy to observe other places. The anger in her heart rose. Then, Tsunade completely gave up defense and concentrated her strength on her right hand. Several Taketori Jonin saw the opportunity and immediately rushed forward, stabbing the bone spurs on the palms. Chichichi. In an instant, the 6 Taketori Jonin used the bone spurs to pierce Tsunade from different angles. However, Tsunade seemed to feel no pain at all. She just jumped up angrily, forcibly broke free from the bone spurs on her body, clenched her fists and smashed them hard on the ground below. Not good. Get out of the way. Ryuze couldn't help but warn her when he saw it. Tsunade's power is extremely terrifying, especially when she completely abandons her skills and decides to overwhelm others with force. It is extremely dangerous. Ordinary people, let alone being hit directly, will be seriously injured, even if they are affected by the spreading shockwave. Earth-shaking fist then, in the horrified eyes of Ryuze and others, Tsunade punched the ground with all her strength. Boom. In an instant, the ground shook, and the entire city wall began to sway. The place where Tsunade's fist landed instantly broke and collapsed, with huge cracks spreading in all directions. Boom. When the cracks expanded to the limit, the city wall with a radius of nearly 100 meters collapsed instantly, and a huge crack appeared. The city wall collapsed. Even the city wall, that was specially reinforced by the earth escape ninjutsu, could not withstand Tsunade's strange power, and was directly shaken down. Chapter 216. Dangerous Situation. Part 1. In the direct destructive range of Tsunade's punch, the genin level ninjas were directly killed. The chunin level ninjas barely had a breath left, but they were also dying, and only the jonin level ninjas could barely stand up. Fortunately, the power of such a large-scale attack was dispersed, and they were not hit directly by the fist. Lyuze and his companions were also affected, but they were protected by the rebellious armor and still retained considerable combat effectiveness. However, after witnessing such a terrifying blow, the surroundings instantly became quiet, and both the reformist ninjas and the rebel ninjas all quietly stayed away from here. This level of battle is really too terrible. If you don't want to die, you can only stay away from here. Ahem. Covering his chest and coughing a few times, Lyuze slowly stood up from the rubble, looking at the figure in the center of the collapse and sighed. You are worthy of the name of the three ninjas. Your strength is really extraordinary. Unfortunately, even if it is you, it is not easy to kill us. As he spoke, he silently mobilized the ability of the corpse vein and used the proliferated bone to quickly repair the armor that had been shattered. That's not certain. Tsunade snorted coldly and rushed towards Lyuze again. However, at this moment, two more Taketori Jonin suddenly jumped out from the rubble in front of them and blocked Tsunade's way with their proliferating bone spurs. Don't overestimate your ability. Tsunade snorted coldly and stomped heavily on the ground. Heaven-reaching kick. She completely lost her patience and put aside her scruples. She went all out, and the terrifying power spread out again. Boom. The wall that had already been broken into a gap collapsed again, further expanding the gap. The Taketori Jonins who were blocking the way, as well as the 4 Jonins who rushed over from all sides, were blown away by the powerful impact before they could get close. Although the spreading power was not enough to kill them, it could still cause them considerable damage. More importantly, it was difficult for them to get close to Tsunade, and their advantages in physical skills could not be used. Tsunade regained the upper hand. Damn it. Seeing the opponent rushing towards him again, Lyuze couldn't help but curse inwardly, and then quickly activated the corpse bone vein to produce bone spurs on the surface of his body, wrapping himself up like a hedgehog. Tsunade was speechless for a moment, looking at the dense bone spurs. She didn't know how to start. To be honest, with the 100 healing technique, she was not afraid of getting hurt and could use the injury for life fighting method and punched down recklessly. But the problem was that each bone spur on Lyuze's body was more than 2 meters long. This also meant that, even if she used the injury for life fighting method, she couldn't reach the core of the bone spurs, and it was difficult to hurt the target. After all, her arm length was far less than the length of those bone spurs, and a rash punch would only make her suffer in vain. Damn it. Seeing this situation, the exasperated Tsunade could only temporarily give up the idea of killing Lyuze, because it was too tricky. Bang. She then kicked a stone next to her and kicked the stone towards Lyuze. Since it was difficult to make direct contact, this indirect attack was the only option. Rokuze, who had transformed into a hedgehog, naturally found it difficult to move and dodge, and was hit by the stone in an instant. Seeing that, his whole body flew out with the stone and fell heavily under the city wall. Lord Rokuze, the several Jonin such as Taketori Shinsuke were blown away, couldn't help but exclaimed. Instead of worrying about him, you might as well worry about yourself first. Tsunade turned around and looked at the few people coldly. After the attack just now, she felt that she seemed to have found a way to deal with the Taketori clan. However, at this moment, the stone that fell to the ground suddenly cracked, and several sharp bone spurs grew out of the cracks, and then the whole stone completely collapsed, and Rokuze's figure reappeared in front of everyone. He didn't die like this? Tsunade was surprised to notice the changes below, but soon she figured out everything. In order to ensure that the stone would not be broken by her kick, she deliberately restrained a lot of strength. In addition, Lyuze fell on the softer ground below with a stone, and the impact of the stone was also buffered to a certain extent. In this case, the power of her kick naturally could not kill Taketori Lyuze, who was wearing special armor. It seems that I have to change a throwing object. She couldn't help but frown secretly. The stone was too fragile and could not bear her power at all. She had to find a solid heavy object to let her fully exert her power. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but think of another companion among the three ninjas, Jiraiya. Jiraiya often summoned the Maiboki mountain toads, among which there were several extremely large ones, and the weapons they used were also extremely large. I still remember that in her previous life, she also used Gamabunta's dagger to nail another summoned giant beast, Manch, to the ground in one fell swoop. If she had such a giant weapon in hand at this moment, she could easily deal with the group of hedgehog-like guys in front of her. At this moment, the rebel Miss Ninja who was besieging the rescue team not far away noticed Tsunade's presence, and someone immediately shouted at Tsunade-sama, "Here is the old chief of the Taketori clan who escaped. Please help me capture them." Tsunade's attention immediately turned over, and she also saw the group of ninjas wearing armor rushing out. "You are quite good at picking the time. Unfortunately, you ran into me." Tsunade's mouth showed a meaningful smile, and then she rushed over with a step. "Stop her." Taketori Shinsuke was shocked and accelerated to catch up. But sometimes, if you are slow in one step, you will be slow in all steps. Tsunade's physical skills are a little worse than Th's, but her strength is stronger. With her strength advantage, Tsunade's burst of sprint speed is naturally faster than Th's. In just a moment, several senior ninjas were pulled away by a considerable distance. "Fujitsu, be careful, that's Tsunade-sama from Konoha." Seeing that he couldn't catch up, Taketori Shinsuke hurriedly warned the rescue team that was trying to break through. "What?" Taketori Fujitsu, who was leading the team to break through with difficulty, was startled and finally noticed the exquisite figure running towards him. "Stop her." With his shout, two ninjutsu type ninjas and the team took the lead. Water style, water dragon bullet technique, lightning style, earthwalker water dragon condensed out of thin air, and then roared and pounced on Tsunade who was rushing over. But that water dragon was different. It was wrapped in a layer of blue lightning and exuded a terrifying aura. Earth-shaking punch. Seeing that the two combined ninjutsu were coming fiercely, Tsunade did not block it. After jumping high, she punched the ground in front of her with all her strength. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217, Dangerous Situation, Part 2. Boom. Another earthquake shook the ground. With Tsunade's punch as the center, the ground within 100 meters collapsed again. She once again created a gap in the city wall. As for the water dragon wrapped in lightning, it was directly scattered in front of Tsunade by the rubble shaken up by the punch just now, and it was not hurt at all. What's worse is that Tsunade's amazing blow directly enveloped the entire rescue team and the surrounding rebel ninjas. In an instant, corpses were everywhere and wailing continued. Of course, the reason why she was so ruthless was because she had already seen that there were no Konoha ninjas nearby. As for how many rebel ninjas would die, she didn't care at all, as long as she could intercept the rescue team. Without bothering to check his own injuries, Taketori Fujitsu hurriedly climbed up from the rubble and said to the rest of his teammates, "Tsunade is too strong. Take the old clan leader away." Hearing this, the ceiling ninja and the perception ninja nodded, immediately lifted up the old clan leader, and staggered forward while enduring the pain in their bodies. Although the blow from Tsunade was not fatal, they also suffered serious internal injuries. They were not good at fighting, so there was no need for them to stay. It would be better to take the old clan leader away quickly. The old clan leader was about to object, but hesitated for a moment and swallowed the words that were already on his lips. Facing such a strong enemy, he was unwilling to abandon his clan members and escape alone, but he also knew that he was old and weak, and it was difficult for him to help. Staying would only be a burden, especially since the opponent's target was himself. If he was forced to stay, it would only harm everyone. Helplessly, he could only be taken away by the two rescue ninjas. Want to leave? It's not that easy. Tsunade snorted coldly and pounced on him again. Without the time to use ninjutsu, Taketori Fujitsu and the other 3 taijutsu ninjas immediately rushed forward and engaged Tsunade in a physical battle. Unfortunately, it was their first time fighting Tsunade and they were inexperienced. Tsunade's all-out attack at the cost of her life immediately made them suffer a great loss. Die. One of them thought he had seized the opportunity and stabbed the bone spur into Tsunade's body very smoothly. Naive guy. Tsunade sneered and immediately grabbed the hand that the other party had stabbed. Be careful, she has used the 100 healings technique and gained super strong self-healing ability. She is not afraid of ordinary injuries at all. Taketori Shinsuke, who was chasing after her, warned loudly. Unfortunately, it was too late. Tsunade grabbed the arm of the Taketori Jonin and cut off the bone spur that had pierced into her body. Then she swung it with one hand, spinning it around like a windmill. Bang, bang, bang. Taketori Fujitsu and the others were unable to dodge and were immediately swung away. After forcing several people to retreat, Tsunade noticed the half-broken armor of the Taketori ninja in her hand and the armor of the few people just now, and a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. How could I forget this? A meaningful smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. She had been unable to find a suitable weapon or throwing object to deal with the tough armor of the Taketori clan, but she forgot that the Taketori clan, who covered themselves tightly with armor, were themselves qualified weapons. She could just grab the Taketori ninjas and swing them up like a hammer and use the armor on their bodies to collide with each other. In this way, with her powerful strength, she would definitely be able to destroy this strong armor defense. Of course, this kind of humanoid weapon is not something that ordinary people can wield. Only ninjas like her who have mastered the ultimate power will use people as weapons. After realizing this, she immediately gave up the idea of letting go of the Taketori ninja in her hand and prepared to continue to use it. Just as she was about to continue chasing the fleeing old Taketori clan leader, Taketori Shinsuke and others behind her had already launched the technique. Corpse Vein Dance of Early Warmth. Corpse Vein Dance of Early Warmth. 6 Taketori Jonins who had awakened the corpse vein cast the technique at the same time, and immediately one after another huge bone spurs broke through the surface of the ground and stabbed at Tsunade. In other words, they dared to use this large-scale ninjutsu attack only after all the people nearby were cleared out or simply scared away by Tsunade. If it was earlier when there were many people, they would never dare to use this trick casually. After all, it was 6 Taketori Jonins who attacked at the same time, and there were too many bone spurs emerging from the ground. After dodging 8 bone spurs in a row, Tsunade finally failed to dodge and was pierced through the abdomen by the 9th bone spur and was directly pushed into the air like a skewer of meat. Then, the 6 Jonins used the ability of the corpse bone veins to control bones and use the bone spurs as a medium to escape. They instantly came to Tsunade and launched a joint attack on her again. It's not that easy to kill me, Tsunade shouted angrily and immediately swung the Taketori ninja that she had not yet let go. Bang, bang, bang. Taketori Shinsuke and the others were unable to dodge and were immediately smashed out. Fortunately, because they were pierced in the air by the bone spurs, their bodies were in great pain, and Tsunade could not use her full strength, so she only forced everyone back and did not cause too serious damage. Break. Then, she heard a loud shout and smashed the bone spur that pierced her with a single palm and stood up freely again. Die. Looking at the 3 old Taketori clan leaders who had already jumped off the wall, she did not give up and immediately threw the bone spur that had just been pulled out of her body, which was 5 or 6 meters long, at the 3 with force, like shooting a giant bone spear. Be careful, Eliuze, who had just climbed up the wall and was about to join the siege, noticed the attack and immediately issued a warning and quickly concentrated his chakra on his arms. In an instant, through the control of the corpse bone vein, bone spurs as thick as wrists grew out of his body one after another, like a cluster of dense bushes growing rapidly, blocking the huge bone spur that was thrown. Unfortunately, Tsunade's strength was far more than his dozens or even hundreds of times. This full strength throw was simply not something he could resist. Boom. There was only a burst of bangs, and the bone spur bushes that Eliuze had spawned were instantly shattered, and they couldn't even delay the target. He himself couldn't even stand, and was directly knocked away by the impact of the bone spur bushes. However, He didn't need to remind him, and the perception ninja who had just landed under the city immediately noticed the terrifying attack from the city wall. Without bothering to explain too much to the other two, he immediately pushed them aside, and the three of them fell to the ground. The sealed ninja was suddenly pushed to the ground for no apparent reason. Just as he was about to ask something, he suddenly felt a strong wind blowing over his head, and then a terrifying force fell on the place where they had just stopped. Boom. With a loud noise, the ground collapsed, and the rocks cracked instantly, and a huge bone spur was deeply embedded in the ground. Chapter 218, Dangerous Situation, Part 2. Then, Tsunade pushed hard on her feet, and the whole person shot out like a cannonball. Stop her. Taketori Shinsuke, who had just climbed up, was so scared that he rushed down the city wall. It was obvious that Tsunade's target was still their old clan leader. Hearing this, the other Taketori Jonin who still had some fighting power followed closely, completely ignoring the pain of their injuries. Be careful, Tsunade is coming. Without caring about anything else, he shouted a warning, and the sensing ninja quickly got up and quickly formed a set of hand seals. Water style, iron cannonball. After taking a deep breath, he puffed up his cheeks, and then suddenly spit out a blue water bullet. The water bullet swelled against the wind and instantly became as big as a millstone, bombarding Tsunade directly. Tsunade, who was already in mid-air, had no way to dodge, so she could only clench her fist and smash it down. Bang! The compressed water bullet was easily shattered, and it couldn't stop Tsunade at all. Seeing the distance between the two sides getting closer and closer, the sealed ninja finally completed his technique. Water style. 4 God Seal. 4 streams of blue water gushed up from the ground around him, and then turned into 4 blue chains as thick as thighs and shot towards the target. Tsunade immediately turned over to avoid it, but the 4 water chains were extremely flexible under the control of the sealed ninja. After dodging 3 times in a row, her left foot was still caught by one of the water chains. Oh no, she thought to herself, but it was too late. As the first water chain locked one of her feet and restricted her movements, the other 3 water chains followed closely and locked her arms and right foot together. In an instant, Tsunade was locked by 4 water chains in the shape of a big character and hung in the air. I locked her. The sealed ninja was excited. Don't be happy too soon. Tsunade's extraordinary strength is unparalleled, and it is absolutely impossible for ordinary people to restrain her. Ryuze, who was knocked down from the city for the second time, also climbed up and looked at the exquisite figure in the air with a solemn face. As expected, just after he finished speaking, Tsunade, who had been locked up, struggled. Not good. Seeing that the water chain was pulled in the opposite direction, the sealing ninja changed his face and immediately made a seal to try to stabilize the water chain and pull Tsunade's limbs apart again. If the human body's limbs want to move and exert force, there must be a pre-bending process, otherwise it will be difficult to exert force. This is why when locking people, the target is generally fixed in a cross shape, or the hands and feet are directly spread out. Unfortunately, he underestimated Tsunade's strength. The difference in strength between the two is too great. Even in a state of being stretched by the limbs, Tsunade can still pull the water chain little by little and bend the joints again. What's worse is that, because of the reverse effect of the sealing ninja, the originally soft water chain was stretched straight and pulled very tight. But its own mass is not enough to withstand the pulling between the two. Bang, bang, bang. With a series of explosions, the 4 water chains were instantly broken, and Tsunade was freed again, and fell towards the 3 people. Get out of the way. Ryuze saw it, and shouted a warning, and rushed over at an accelerated speed. Having seen Tsunade's terrifying power, the 3 old clan leaders did not dare to block it, and immediately scattered and retreated. But Tsunade, who had completely let go of her scruples, was not so easy to deal with. The sky high kick concentrated the power in her right leg, and Tsunade kicked the ground fiercely. Boom. With a loud bang, the area of nearly 100 meters was hit by a terrifying force, and the ground collapsed instantly, and there was no complete foothold. There was no time to escape the opponent's attack range, and the 3 old clan leaders were immediately hit and fell to the ground. The more fragile seal ninjas and perception ninjas immediately vomited blood and could no longer get up. Fortunately, they were protected by the rebellious armor, otherwise their injuries would not only be vomiting blood. At this time, Ryuze had also caught up, and each of them had 2 bone spurs in his palm. Willow dance, he quickly swung the bone spurs and attacked Tsunade, trying to attract the attention of this terrifying strongman, and make him stop. Unfortunately, knowing that he had awakened the corpse bone vein, and could repair the armor at any time, it was not so easy to kill him. Tsunade was too lazy to entangle with him, and punched him without turning her head. Faced with such a blow, Ryuze naturally did not dare to take it head on. Maybe he could pierce Tsunade's arm with the bone spurs, but he would definitely be beaten half to death by the opponent's terrifying power. Helplessly, he could only choose to dodge and forcibly interrupt his combo offensive. Without his harassment, Tsunade took the opportunity to use the flash body technique and came to the old patriarch in a flash. Although this is the first time I meet you, but I'm sorry, please go to death. She clenched her fist and punched the old patriarch who had just climbed up from the ground. However, just as the fist was about to hit her, a powerful aura suddenly burst out from the old clan leader who could not even stand steadily. He took a wrong step and moved his body to the side, avoiding Tsunade's punch in time. Bang! The punch missed, and the terrifying force hit the air, making a slight explosion. Tsunade was a little surprised. With her professional sensitivity, she could roughly judge, based on the life breath in the other party's body, that the old bamboo cutter clan leader in front of her should be over 60 years old, and had entered the stage of old age and physical weakness. It stands to reason that a normal person at this age cannot avoid her punch, especially since the other party was just injured by her heaven-reaching kick. But soon, she figured out the key. The bamboo cutter clan is a famous family of physical skills, and they also have the blood limit of corpse vein that can increase physical fitness. Therefore, even at this age, their physical fitness is much stronger than that of normal old people, and their reaction speed is also faster. Completely unaware that she had thought of so much in an instant, the old clan leader could not help but laugh at himself. It seems that I have really been underestimated. As he spoke, he had already clenched his fist and hit Tsunade's armpit. Bang! Tsunade was caught off guard and was hit right on the spot, stepping back several steps. After regaining her footing, she felt the severe pain under her ribs and frowned slightly and said, "It seems that I really underestimated you, old man. Just this blow, a normal person would definitely suffer serious internal injuries. Unfortunately, she has the 100 healings technique, and this kind of injury is useless to her." After just one deep breath, the injuries caused by the old Taketori clan leader to her were completely healed. Just as she was about to launch another attack, Taketori Shinsuke and several other jonin finally arrived and blocked the old clan leader. Perhaps we will witness the fall of a legend today. After reuniting with a few people and looking at Tsunade in front of him, Luz couldn't help but sigh. Apart from the few who were just seriously injured, there are still 10 strong Jonin level warriors left here, and all of them are Jonin wearing the rebel armor. Although the possibility of success is not great, there is still a slight possibility of killing Tsunade. Chapter 219. Dangerous situation. End. Does having more people help? Naive. Tsunade snorted coldly and rushed forward immediately. Luz and his group immediately dispersed and rushed forward from different angles. Their number was their advantage, so they naturally had to make good use of it. Sky-kicked Tsunade, who was speeding up and sprinting, suddenly paused for a moment and then stepped heavily on the ground. Boom. There was another earthquake, and the already broken ground was crushed again by Tsunade's strange power, breaking even more thoroughly. The area within 100 meters had sunk a lot, and countless rubble bounced up and shot out in all directions. Having already seen the methods of this Thousand Hands princess, Luz and his group jumped up together and avoided the impact of the ground. Only 2 Jonin were too seriously injured and were a little slow to dodge. They were knocked to the ground and buried in the rubble. Corpse Vein Dance of Early Ferns. Corpse Vein Dance of Early Ferns. Taketori Shinsuke and other Jonins who had awakened the corpse vein launched their ultimate moves again the moment they landed. In an instant, bone spurs as thick as an adult's thigh broke out of the ground one after another, densely stabbing towards Tsunade. Having also seen such a trick before, Tsunade seemed much more calm in dealing with it this time. After dodging another bone spur that stabbed up from under her feet, she immediately climbed up along the bone spur without changing her position, allowing the bone spur that was growing taller and taller to carry her up. At this point, using the bone spur under her body as a foothold, Tsunade easily avoided the attacks of the other bone spurs around her. When all the bone spurs stopped growing, the area within a radius of 100 meters was covered with white bone spurs, turning into a forest of white bones. Kill. Taketori Shinsuke and his companions did not hesitate, and immediately used the bone forest to escape, instantly passing through the bone forest blocking the way in front of them, and came to Tsunade, and then launched a surprise attack from all angles in a very tacit manner. Facing such a surprise attack, Tsunade naturally had no way to defend, let alone resist. Kai. Everyone's bone spurs did not miss, and each one pierced into her chest. However, with the protection of the 100 healings technique, she naturally did not take this attack seriously, but instead launched a counter-attack at the same time. With just one sudden stretch of her hand, she grabbed one of the Taketori ninjas who used bone spurs to attack her at close range. Die, she shouted angrily, easily breaking the bone spurs in the man's hand, and then directly swung the man up and smashed him towards the other people around him. Bang bang bang. Taketori Shinsuke and his companions had never expected Tsunade to be so brave, and they had no time to dodge, and were swung away directly. After a series of screams, the people who were hit all fell to the ground, and their armor was broken into pieces. At the same time, Ryuze, who was moving quickly in the bone forest, suddenly noticed that there was another figure rushing in on his right side. You are the old clan leader? Why did you catch up? Ryuze was shocked. Although he couldn't see his face, he could feel that the chakra aura on the other person was very different from that of others, and there was obviously a sense of aging. In his impression, he didn't bring a fellow ninja who was 1 year older to the battlefield. Then, the only one who appeared here with such an old chakra aura was the old clan leader who had just escaped. Although I'm old, I'm not so old that I'm useless. The old clan leader waved his hand, looked at Ryuze and said, as for you, I heard from Fujitsuko that you have been managing the clan for the past few years and you have done a great job. It's a pity that you have awakened the corpse vein, otherwise you would be the best candidate for the next clan leader. As he said this, he couldn't help but sigh helplessly. The corpse vein is indeed powerful, but it also has defects, which will shorten the life of the awakened person. Therefore, the position of clan leader must not be inherited by an awakened person. Seeing the old man's firm attitude, Ryuze did not persuade him anymore. Although he is old, the old clan leader is a jonin after all, and his strength is not worse than his. Soon, Ryuze and other jonin who have not awakened the corpse vein came to the depths of the bone forest together, and happened to see Tsunade's powerful scene. Tsunade's strange power is amazing. Remember not to fight her head on. After reminding everyone again, he immediately accelerated and rushed up to attack. At this time, the jonin who was caught by Tsunade and used as a weapon was ashamed and angry, and immediately activated the corpse bone vein, proliferating countless bone spurs from the surface of the body. Kai. Tsunade, who caught him with her bare hands, could not avoid the attack of those bone spurs, and her palm was immediately pierced. However, even so, Tsunade had no intention of letting go, and still held the other party tightly in her hand, and continued to attack everyone present. Finally, after being pierced by several bone spurs in succession, Tsunade's entire right arm was pierced to pieces, and she could no longer hold the person, and saw the other party fall from her hand. Seeing this, she did not try to grab it again, because the bamboo cutter ninja with the corpse bone vein was too difficult to deal with. However, after seeing the huge bone spurs next to her, her eyes immediately lit up, and she immediately broke one of the bone spurs, and grabbed it in her hand as a weapon, and continued to fight with the bamboo cutter clan. At the same time, in the direction of the conservatives' main attack, Uchiha Obito was threatened, and had no choice but to appear on the battlefield. He used his would release ability to kill people on the battlefield. Although it was difficult to deal with the jonin with his half-baked wood release ability, it was almost overwhelming against the genin and chunin. In addition, with the leadership of several ninja swordsmen, the conservatives were unstoppable and defeated the rebels. The situation gradually became clear, and many ninjas had quietly left the battlefield to escape. On the neutral side, led by General Manzuki Hazuki, their troops also suppressed the rebel forces and occupied a considerable advantage. Only the reformists, because they had suffered heavy losses from the elite raids of the rebels before, were not advancing fast and only barely had the upper hand. However, the three lines of defense of the rebels are closely related to each other and cannot exist independently. As long as the conservatives completely defeat the enemies on their side of the protective wall, the other two lines of defense will inevitably fall without attack. Seeing through this, Shizune, who was responsible for staying behind to observe the entire battlefield situation, stood up immediately. It's almost time. After a low groan, she immediately rushed into the battlefield holding the little piglet. After deliberately avoiding some more dangerous jonin, she jumped down from the city wall and came to the forest of bones where Tsunade and Liuz and his group were fighting. Tsunade-sama, it's almost time. She didn't dare to get too close, but just shouted from a distance. It's almost time. Hearing this, Tsunade, who was fighting Liuz and others, stopped immediately. After a little reflection, she immediately understood what Shizune meant. The rebels were about to collapse. Chapter 220. The game is over. I see. Go send the signal. Tsunade waved her hand to dismiss him. This was the retreat plan she had prepared early in the morning, and she had quietly informed all the Konoha ninjas. Let Shizune wait and observe outside the battlefield, and send the signal when the time is right. Receiving the signal means that the retreat can begin. After all, retreat cannot be said openly, especially when the rebels are still fighting. Otherwise, it is likely to cause unnecessary trouble. Yes, Shizune responded, and then quickly left with the pig in her arms. Afterwards, Tsunade's attention returned to Liuz and his party on the battlefield, and she said helplessly, let's stop the battle today. I hope you can have such good luck next time. After that, she took a deep look at the people present, then threw away the huge bone spur in her hand, turned around and left without looking back. Should we chase them? Taketori Jonin asked hesitantly. If you are not afraid of death, you can try to chase them. Liuz rolled his eyes at him, and then sat down on the ground, too tired to even move. Legend has it that the three ninjas are too scary. Even though Princess Tsunade was the least skilled in fighting among the three, her fighting ability was far beyond everyone's imagination. The total number of people besieging Tsunade, including Rokuze's group of 7, plus several jonins from the rescue team and the jonins who came to reinforce one after another, exceeded 30. But even so, with so many jonins besieging, they could only barely tie with the other side, and even suffered a lot of serious injuries. If there were no jonins who kept coming to support, and kept the total number of sieges at more than 10, I'm afraid all of them would die here. The jonin who proposed the pursuit was speechless, and ended the topic awkwardly. Then, Rokuze cast his eyes on Taketori Fujitsugu who was not far away, and earnestly instructed, Jonin Fujitsugu, please send the old clan leader and the other seriously injured people back to the camp. The rest of you who still have the fighting power, continue to charge with me. After saying that, he stood up and ran towards the city wall again. Because of the deliberate care of Taketori Shinsuke and other senior ninjas, he was not seriously injured in the battle with Tsunade, so he still retained a lot of physical strength and combat effectiveness. In this case, it was naturally impossible for him to continue to hide behind and rest leisurely. Seeing this, the senior ninjas immediately followed and continued to join the new battlefield. Only a few such as Taketori Fujitsu stayed in place to help transfer the old clan leader and the wounded. At the same time, the air ninja who had been ordered to keep an eye on Tsunade noticed the movements of the Konoha ninjas and immediately reported the information to Shenron on the battlefield. He punched the ninja in front of him and repelled the rest of the ninjas behind him. Shenron took the opportunity to get rid of the battle. I didn't expect that these guys from Konoha are so cunning. He had already seen the purpose of Konoha's early retreat. This war is no longer reversible. Let our people retreat quietly. Also, have someone keep an eye on Tsunade. Don't lose her. After giving the order, Shenron quietly disappeared into the shadows, after punching another mist ninja who rushed up without knowing the danger. As the Sky Ninja also quietly retreated, some ninjas who were still fighting gradually realized the changes in the situation on the battlefield and left the battlefield and began to flee. Soon, the retreat of a small number of people turned into a large-scale escape, like a collapsed domino. A chain reaction occurred on the battlefield, and the entire battle situation collapsed in an instant, and the rebels fell into complete defeat. Stop them! Stop them! No matter how the high-ranking officials of the rebels shouted, they could not stop the defeat on the battlefield. Everyone was desperately fleeing, and there was no longer a trace of fighting spirit, and no one was willing to obey their orders. The three reformist parties were in high spirits, and took the opportunity to kill them. Seeing countless rebel ninjas fall to the ground one after another. On the other side, after quietly withdrawing from Cape City, Tsunade immediately led a group of Konoha ninjas to the northwest coast. There is a dock there, and the reinforcement from Konoha will land there. However, now that the situation is over, there is no point, even if the reinforcement arrive, and they can only be taken away from here. My lord, I found that someone seems to be watching us all the time. A sensory ninja followed and reported to Tsunade quietly. Someone? Who? Tsunade looked back at the messenger and asked. It should be the air ninja. The stalker is in the sky. The sensory ninja pointed to the sky and said. The stalker is in the sky. In this place, except for the air ninja who has the ability to fly, it is unlikely to be anyone else. Air ninja? Tsunade looked up at the sky and was a little confused. Unfortunately, it was not yet dawn, and it was pitch black, and she couldn't see what was in the sky at all. Don't worry about them for now, let's go to the dock first. Tsunade waved her hand, and continued to order everyone to hurry up. She couldn't fly, and neither could the other Konoha ninjas. In addition, the attack range of ninjutsu was limited. As long as the air ninjas didn't seek death, it would be difficult for them to do anything to the air ninjas in the sky. Soon, the Konoha group arrived at the dock. Everyone take a good rest and wait patiently for reinforcement to pick you up. But don't let your guard down. The enemy is likely to continue to catch up. Tsunade ordered everyone. Yes. Everyone responded and then sat down to rest. Not long after, the sound of breaking waves came from the sea in the distance. Tsunade and the Konoha ninjas immediately cheered up and looked towards the sea. As the sound of breaking waves got closer and closer, they could vaguely see a huge shadow appearing on the sea. It's a ship. It should be our reinforcement. The Konoha ninjas couldn't help but get excited. However, the accompanying perception ninjas felt that something was wrong, but they couldn't tell. At this moment, a familiar, powerful energy fluctuation suddenly came from the sea. Oh no, that's the chakra cannon of the air ninja. Everyone be careful to avoid it. The most sensitive perception type ninja exclaimed immediately. However, as soon as the voice fell, the powerful energy wave landed on the dock. Boom. Accompanied by a roar, a dazzling light bloomed on the ground, and then a terrifying impact spread. The Konoha ninjas didn't react at all, and were caught off guard. Many people fell to the ground, and died on the spot. These damn guys. Tsunade was furious. The Sky Country, where the air ninjas were located, was destroyed by the Fire Country. Originally, seeing that they were also helping the rebel forces of the Kirigakure, she chose to let this group of remnants go temporarily, and did not deliberately target them. Who would have thought that this group of guys not only didn't know what was good for them, but also dared to take the initiative, to come to her house to cause trouble, which really made her angry. Chapter 221, 8-Gate Shenning. Just as the angry Tsunade was preparing to cross the sea to fight and destroy the air ninja ship on the distant sea, a sturdy figure fell from the sky and landed not far in front of her. We meet again, Princess Tsunade. Shenning greeted with a fake smile. It's you. Recognizing the person, Tsunade's anger almost burst out of her eyes. Knowing the hatred between the two sides, she knew that there was no possibility of any easing, so she didn't waste her breath and rushed over immediately, ready to kill the leader of the air ninja here and completely solve the problem. Looking for me is the biggest mistake in your revenge plan. Seeing the target into her attack range, she roared and clenched her fist and hit it. That's hard to say. Shenning didn't explain, let alone dodge. He sneered and opened his 5 fingers to meet it, and grabbed the white fist fearlessly. Boom. A terrifying force exploded in Shenning's palm, and was transmitted to the ground along his body. A terrifying impact spread and shook the ground within a radius of nearly 10 meters into pieces. However, even in the face of such a terrifying force, Shenning only took 2 steps back and was not instantly knocked away like an ordinary ninja. This guy. Tsunade was secretly surprised when she saw it. As early as the battlefield in Cape City before, she saw Shenning showing amazing physical strength, but she had never come into contact with him in person, so she didn't know how strong his strength was. Now, after this confrontation, she has roughly figured out that Shenning's strength is only a little bit worse than hers in normal state. Although not as good as her, he is also the strongest person in the entire ninja world. As expected of the legendary 3 ninjas, it's not easy for me to beat you in this state. After regaining his footing, Shenning swung his left fist to fight back. Bang! Tsunade was also not afraid. She opened her left hand with 5 fingers and greeted him, and also clasped the opponent's fist. Boom. Another powerful force erupted between the 2 people, shaking the cracked ground around them even more. However, unlike Shenning who took 2 steps back to block the attack, Tsunade completely blocked the opponent's punch without taking a step back. However, before Tsunade could be happy, she heard Shenning say meaningfully, "But if I change my state, can you still block it?" While speaking, he silently mobilized the power of the Zero Tail that had long been integrated into his body. After 2 years of careful training, although he has not found a suitable tailed beast to provide stable energy for the Zero Tail, he still selected some children with dark hearts according to the training method of his previous life, absorbed their negative energy, and converted it into a part of the Zero Tail's power. Although this part of the Zero Tail's power is not much, it is still enough for him to sustain a battle. Zero Tail's power, 8 gates of ninjutsu, open. With a roar, Shenning used the power of the Zero Tail to open the 8 gates of ninjutsu in his own unique way. Instantly, a black chakra light burst out from him, releasing an ominous and oppressive aura, which pressed down the broken ground around him. What? Tsunade, who was close at hand, was horrified. As a top medical ninja, she immediately noticed the changes in the other person's body in such a close contact. That was the natural shackles of the human body, the 8 gates, being opened. Since the 4th Ninja World War in her previous life, this was the 2nd time she saw the 8 gates fully opened. Although Shenning's state was very different from that of Might Guy at the time, she was still sure that the other person had opened the 8 gates. It was just that the opening method was different. Shenning did not have the terrifying feeling that Might Guy had after opening the 8 gates. You know, after opening the 8 gates, just a glance at Might Guy would make her feel irresistible and unmatched. But the Shenning in front of her did not reach that level, probably equivalent to the level of Might Guy's 7 gates. However, even so, the Shenning in front of her was terrifying enough. That was enough to rival the power of the 7 gates Might Guy, and only a handful of people in the entire ninja world could withstand it. Immediately afterwards, before Tsunade could react, Shenning took the initiative and tightened the 5 fingers holding Tsunade's right fist. Kakaka. With the super strength he gained after opening the 8 gates, Shenning crushed Tsunade's right fist, and bright red blood flowed from the gaps between his 5 fingers. Ah! Tsunade screamed in pain. But Shenning's attack did not end there, and he kicked Tsunade in the chest again, and the chest of the blonde beauty collapsed and shot out backwards. Tsunade-sama, some Konoha ninjas were very anxious when they saw this, and immediately rushed towards Shenning, wanting to help share the pressure. However, Shenning did not even look at them, but stepped heavily on the ground, and a terrifying force erupted, shocking the ninjas who rushed up, and made them spit blood and fly backwards. Tsunade, who stood up with the help of Shizune, saw this scene and immediately reminded loudly, "He is not an enemy you can deal with, don't get close to him." As she spoke, she had already injured the pain, and opened the yin seal on her forehead again. Ninjutsu creation regeneration 100 healings technique in an instant. With the blue-purple diamond mark as a core, a black curse seal spread and expanded in all directions, and soon covered Tsunade's whole body. Relying on the regenerative power of this technique, Tsunade's right fist that had been crushed and collapsed chest quickly recovered and returned to their original state. "I will stop him, all of you stay away." Getting rid of Shizune's support, Tsunade rushed towards Shenning again, and gave orders to everyone. With the 100 healings technique to protect her, She was not worried about being hit by the chakra cannon on the ship, but others could not, and they had to stay away from here. As for the ship on the sea, she did not plan to send anyone to destroy it, because, after a night of fighting, everyone was very tired. If they were asked to cross the sea to fight at this time, they would only die in vain. As long as he could deal with Sheneng in front of him, all problems could be solved. Earth-shaking fist seeing Sheneng enter his attack range again, Tsunade jumped up, concentrated chakra in his right hand, and smashed it hard at the target on the ground. Super active fist facing the punch that fell from the sky. Sheneng did not dodge, and also concentrated power in his right hand, turning it into a black and red ominous energy bomb in his palm to meet it. Boom. In an instant, two extreme forces collided in mid-air, and suddenly a terrifying wave spread out. The ground within a radius of nearly 100 meters collapsed instantly, and sank more than a few meters. However, even if Tsunade used the 100 healing technique, she did not gain any advantage. Instead, her fist and arm were shattered by Sheneng's more terrifying power, and she was directly blasted into the sky. Chapter 222, Seeing Through the Reality. Then, before Tsunade fell from the sky, the chakra cannons on the air ninja ship on the sea locked on and fired again. Boom boom boom. In an instant, nearly 20 compressed chakra energy bombs hit Tsunade, and the light produced by the explosion immediately illuminated the sky, as if it were daytime, so bright that people could not open their eyes at all. When the dazzling light disappeared, Tsunade had already fallen to the ground covered in blood. Tsunade-sama, Shizune, who was watching the battle from a distance, couldn't help but shout out. After following Tsunade for so long, this was the first time she saw Tsunade injured so seriously. You know, even when fighting Orochimaru in the previous life, this sir had never ended up in such a situation. If she hadn't known that Tsunade's 100 healings technique had the ability to regenerate, as long as the chakra was not exhausted, she could come back to life. Even if she only had one breath left, she would have rushed into the battlefield at this moment. At this moment, Tsunade, who was covered in blood on the ground, trembled and climbed up, and then turned back, and glanced at her little apprentice coldly. What are you panicking about? As soon as the 100 healings technique was activated, its powerful regenerative power acted on every inch of her skin and every bone. As long as there was any injury, it would stimulate its regenerative healing power. When she stood up again, all the wounds had been completely healed, and even the right hand, that had been crushed like a meat paste, was restored again, without any scars. Is this your 100 healings technique? It's really powerful. If I can get it, I think my flesh activation technique will definitely be greatly improved. Sheneng was very excited when he saw it, and he became more determined to get this technique. As top medical ninjas, he and Tsunade have many similarities in their abilities, and the other party's 100 healings technique will be of great benefit to him. Unfortunately, the other party was born in Konoha, and Konoha had a feud with them, the Sky Ninja, to destroy the country and the village. If he proposed an equal exchange, the other party would definitely not agree. Otherwise, he would not take such a big risk and use the power of Zero Tail that he had accumulated with great difficulty here. So, you are interested in my 100 healings technique? Tsunade was a little surprised. She thought the other party was seeking revenge, but who would have thought it was for this? Not entirely because of this. Sheneng shook his index finger, smiling and saying, if I can collect some interest from you for the revenge of destroying the country, I will still be very happy. As he spoke, he stepped forward and rushed towards Tsunade. Only a huge deep pit was left behind. With his own terrifying power, Sheneng's burst of speed far exceeded Tsunade's imagination. Before she could react, the muscular monster had already arrived in front of her. Super active fist without using any skills or tactics, Sheneng chose to break through from the front, condensing the powerful power obtained after opening the 8 gates in the palm of his hand, turning it into a black and red energy ball, and quickly pushed it towards Tsunade. There was no time to dodge, let alone think. Tsunade instinctively condensed chakra in her right hand, and also met it. Earth-shaking fisted was another simple clash, and the terrifying impact of the collision between the two sides spread, once again collapsing an area of nearly 100 meters. The result was still the same as before. Tsunade fell into a disadvantage, and her fist and arm were broken, and she was shaken away. However, She was not discouraged and quickly got up and went forward without fear. With the sound of fists colliding, the two strong men with top attainments in strength fought back and forth for more than 10 rounds with big and powerful physical skills. Of course, Tsunade's strength was far inferior to her opponent. In such a head-on fighting style, she was naturally at a disadvantage. She only managed to hold on with the powerful regeneration ability of the 100 healing technique. Are you not going to give up? You can't be my opponent at all. Shenum couldn't help but sneer at the wounds that were constantly healing but constantly appearing. The abilities of the two were very similar, and they were both the type of fighters who used big and powerful moves to overwhelm others. Because of this, it was difficult for Tsunade to catch his attacks, and every collision left her with scars. Tsunade was not cowardly. She endured the severe pain and fought back, saying, although I don't know what method you used to open the 8 gates, but I know very well that the 8 gates are the natural confinement and restriction of the human body. Forcibly opening them to gain power is essentially just overdrawing your own potential, and the human body is limited after all. How long can you maintain this state after overdrawing your own potential? As she said this, she couldn't help but curl her lips. According to the characteristics of the 8 gates, the stronger the power Shenum showed, the greater his overdrawn consumption, which means that the duration will not be too long. I still remember that during the 4th Ninja World War in my previous life, Might Guy opened the 8 gates, but it only lasted less than 10 minutes. According to her professional evaluation, Shenum's strength was far inferior to Might Guy at that time. Even if this guy's 8 gates lasted longer than Might Guy, it would definitely not exceed an hour. On the other hand, her 100 healings technique relies on the chakra storage of the Yin Seal for decades to maintain. Not to mention a mere hour. Even if she fights for 3 days and 3 nights in this state, there will be no problem. In other words, as long as she persists patiently and drags it until Shenum exhausts his potential and can no longer maintain the 8 gates state, then it will be her turn around. Hearing this, Shenum couldn't help but shrink. As expected of the top medical ninja, he saw through his strength so quickly. He innovatively used the power of the Zero Tail to replace his own potential overdraft, so he can open the 8 gates freely without worrying about overdraft. But his Zero Tail power is not much, and it can only last him half an hour. If he can't solve Tsunade within half an hour, he will be in big trouble. Thinking of this, he immediately stepped up his offensive and no longer spared his strength. Superactive Fist, a black and red ominous energy bomb condensed in his palm again and pushed it towards Tsunade fiercely. Earth-shaking Fist Tsunade did not retreat and also attacked with attack. Tough. Boom. With a loud noise, the horrible impact shook the ground and she was severely injured and flew out again. Shenum did not waste time, and he accelerated to catch up with her and condensed another black and red energy bullet in his palm. Superactive Fist, just as he was about to launch another attack, or 3-pronged kunai with Sword of Ninja Love written on the handle suddenly flew over from the right. Someone sneaked up. Shenum noticed the kunai, but did not take it too seriously, because the lethality of the ninja tool throwing was very limited, and it was impossible to hurt him at all. It was even impossible to break through his body defense in this 8-door state. Chapter 223, Watergate appears. However, Shenum was careless this time. Just when the kunai entered the 1-meter range around him, a man in a white robe and golden hair suddenly appeared in front of him and grabbed the 3-pronged kunai. This is impossible. Faced with the sudden appearance of the enemy, Shenum was shocked. Because the opponent appeared so suddenly, he didn't notice how the opponent came over, and he didn't even sense the appearance of the opponent's chakra beforehand. It was as if he appeared in front of him out of thin air. Not only that, the person who came was holding a light blue chakra energy ball in his right hand. He recognized it at a glance. It was the ultimate move used by Uzumaki Naruto when he fought with him in his previous life. However, the person in front of him was not Uzumaki Naruto. Rasengan, the person who came, didn't hesitate and directly pressed the chakra energy ball that was as big as a small bowl over. Because the opponent appeared too suddenly, Shen Nang was caught off guard. In addition, at such a close distance, he didn't even have the chance to change his moves and react. He could only watch the chakra ball hit his waist. Boom. A terrifying and familiar power bloomed in Shen Nang. Even though the black and red energy bomb in his hand was only half a foot away from Tsunade, this half foot seemed as far away as heaven and earth in his eyes at this moment. Shen-nan couldn't stand it all and was directly blown away by the twisted power of the Rasengan. Ahem, you're finally here, 4th generation. Standing up with difficulty, looking at the young man who had just come to the rescue, Tsunade's face had a relaxed smile. Although she could rely on the 100 healings technique to withstand Shen-nan's attack without dying and force time to go on, she couldn't guarantee whether Shen-nan had other means. If she missed, it might be impossible to recover. Therefore, she was always very nervous. Now that the 4th generation arrived in time, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Namake's Minato scratched his head and said with a smile, "We found from a distance that the air ninja ships on the sea seemed to be attacking someone. So I thought about speeding over to see the situation. I didn't expect that it was you, sir, who was fighting the enemy." As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at the landing point of Shenning. He could sense that, after being hit by his Rasengan, the chakra aura on the other party was still very strong, and he didn't look like he was injured. Then, Minato saw Shenning slowly stand up from the ground, and the wound on his waist, caused by the Rasengan, was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. What a strong self-healing ability. "I'm afraid it's not much worse than you, Sir Tsunade." He frowned and said, "This kind of enemy is a very difficult existence on the battlefield, because it is difficult for the other party to be killed, which in turn gives them more opportunities to kill others. Shenning is one of the top medical ninjas in the entire ninja world, and his regeneration ability is naturally extraordinary," Tsunade said with a serious face. "Shenning? You said he is Shenning? This doesn't match the image in the photo I saw." Minato screamed, as if he had seen a ghost, and looked at Shenning again. This muscular man with a body full of muscles, he couldn't associate it with the white-haired old man in the photo. Tsunade rolled her eyes at him, after moving her right arm, that had just recovered, and explained seriously, "The photo you saw is his usual appearance. As for now, he used his secret technique to change his body's future combat form. What's more troublesome is that he used some unknown method to open the 8 gates of acupuncture points, and on this basis, he gained even more terrifying power. Preliminary estimates show that he should be comparable to Might Guy, who opened 7 gates. Even I can't compare with him when I use the 100 healings technique." As she said that, she couldn't help shaking her head. She has always relied on her absolute strength to crush the enemy, but today it was the other way around, which really made her depressed. Comparable to the 7 gates of Gay? Minato was shocked when he heard it. Having experienced the 4th Ninja World War in his previous life, he naturally knew how terrifying Might Guy with the 7 gates opened was. Although Uchiha Madara easily blocked the 7 gates Might Guy's ultimate move, it did not mean that Might Guy was weak at that time. It was just that their enemy Uchiha Madara was too powerful. On the contrary, with the 7 gates Might Guy's attack, except for a few people such as Jinchuriki who could barely block it, the rest of the ninja world would basically die if they encountered it. I have similar abilities to him, but my strength is not as good as his. It's too troublesome to deal with him. Let's leave it to you, Tsunade said again. Namake's Minato mastered the Flying Thunder God technique passed down by the 2nd generation Hokage, and had an extraordinary transfer ability, which was just right for dealing with Shenning, a guy with great power but poor flexibility. Then please stand by and help me." Minato was speechless, but still took on the task. Although he became the 4th Hokage, and Tsunade was only the 5th in her previous life, and seemed to be a generation later than him. In fact, Tsunade and his teacher, Jiraishi, were of the same generation, and were his predecessors. Faced with the request of his predecessors, he naturally tried his best to meet it. At the same time, Shenning was also sorting out the information in his mind, and soon recognized Minato's identity. Only the legendary Flying Thunder God technique could make him suddenly appear in front of him and catch him off guard. "I didn't expect that the 4th Hokage of Konoha would come here, which is really surprising," he mocked unceremoniously. "There is no doubt that Konoha's reinforcement have arrived. It is no wonder that the ships on the sea stopped the shelling on the opposite shore since Minato appeared. This also means that Konoha has no longer concealed and is ready to directly interfere in the internal affairs of the Hidden Mist Village by force. but this behavior is completely inconsistent with the righteous and bright image that Konoha has always shown. However, after thinking about it carefully, Shenron expressed his understanding. If he were the Hokage, he would not miss this golden opportunity. He must protect the Kirigakure rebel forces and drive the snail into the water country, so that the water country would never be at peace. As for the image of a great power, it would be destroyed. Compared with a chaotic water country that no longer poses a threat to them, this little face image is not worth mentioning at all. Unfortunately, they came too late, and the Kirigakure rebel forces had been completely defeated. Hearing Shennon's ridicule, Minato's face tightened, and he was speechless. In fact, he was actually opposed to sending troops to support the Kirigakure rebel forces. He did not want to interfere in the internal affairs of the water country. He only wanted to use his strength to protect the village, rather than this more proactive foreign war. However, the third generation and several senior officials all agreed, so it was useless for him to oppose it. He could only follow the arrangement and lead the reinforcement to come here for support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224, Flying Thunder Magic. No more words, get ready. Minato immediately pulled out a handful of three-pronged kunai from his waist pocket, and then threw them in all directions, scattering them on the battlefield. That was his special kunai. Not only was it more special than ordinary kunai in appearance, but the handle of the kunai was actually branded with his Flying Thunder God mark. It was with the Flying Thunder God mark as the coordinate and guide that he could perform the Flying Thunder God technique to cross space. Flying Thunder God. Recalling the information about Minato Namikaze that his men had collected, Shenron immediately saw the significance of those kunai. I would like to see how you would perform your Flying Thunder God technique without those kunai. Shenron sneered and condensed his chakra all over his body. At this time, dawn had arrived, and there was a little more light in the sky, and all the scenes on the earth became much clearer. As Shenron condensed his power, the black glow on his body became more and more intense, and released an increasingly terrifying and oppressive aura. Super active fist. Then, he shouted loudly, gathered a black and red energy bullet in his hand, and then pressed it hard on the ground. Boom. The terrifying power bloomed on the ground, instantly tearing the ground within a radius of 100 meters, and buried Minato's special kunai into the ground without a trace. The Flying Thunder God technique can travel through space, but after he buried those special kunai into the ground, Minato Namikaze would only be trapped in the ground and unable to move if he rashly used the Flying Thunder God technique again, becoming his living target. Minato saw all of Shennon's actions, but he did not deliberately stop him. Instead, he opened his right hand and gathered chakra in his palm, and another light blue chakra ball condensed. However, this time was different from the previous one. He kept injecting chakra into the light ball, and saw that the light ball, which was originally only the size of a small bowl, expanded by more than dozens of times, and turned into a giant light ball with a diameter of more than 2 meters. Since the ordinary Rasengan is useless to you, why not change to a bigger one? Minato looked at the light ball in his hand, and then looked at Shenron. Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from the light ball, Shennon's face suddenly became extremely solemn. Although he has the ability to regenerate as well as Tsunade, it also needs chakra as a basis to be used. The giant light ball in Minato Namikaze's hand gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. If he was hit by one, he would probably consume most of the limited power of Zero Tail. Fortunately, he had foresight and had buried all the opponent's special kunai underground. In this way, without the blessing of the Flying Thunder God technique, it would be much easier for him to avoid the opponent's attack. Unfortunately, he was too happy too early. He did not notice that on his body, where Minato had just hit with the Rasengan, a special mark had been imprinted, the Sword of Ninja Love. Come on, let's decide the outcome with one move. After taking a serious look at Shenron, Minato immediately rushed forward with the huge chakra ball. No problem. Shenron sneered and went forward. Unfortunately, sensing the terrifying aura of the giant light ball, he naturally couldn't take it head on. He just agreed to Minato's words, just to make the other party lose his vigilance. With his strength, as long as he found an opportunity, he could kill the young Hokage again with a simple punch. Seeing that the two sides were less than 3 meters away, Shenung immediately narrowed his eyes and was very alert. Because of the giant light ball, the opponent's attack range was larger than his. Therefore, at this distance, the opponent could hit him, but he couldn't reach the opponent. In order to give the opponent a fatal blow, he still needed to dodge this terrifying blow. Super Big Bull Rasengan. Seeing that the opponent entered his attack range, Minato didn't hesitate and immediately pressed the giant chakra light ball with a diameter of more than 2 meters over. Now, seeing the right moment, Shenung suddenly kicked the ground, then suddenly changed direction and rushed to the right side and was about to escape the attack range of the giant light ball. However, before he could be happy that he had escaped the fatal blow, Minato and the giant light ball suddenly disappeared from the spot. Before he could react, the man and the ball appeared on his right side again. This is impossible. Seeing Minato Namikaze appearing beside him again, Shenung was immediately shocked. He clearly remembered that he had completely cleared the special Kyune on the ground, and there was no one left. The opponent could not use the Flying Thunder God technique to attack him again. But the cruel reality hit him hard in the face. He had no time to resist, and even just as he screamed, the super large Rasengan had already hit him and blasted him away. Boom. The power of the giant Rasengan exploded with Shenung's body as the center. A dazzling light instantly illuminated the entire earth, and the terrifying twisting force also spread, tearing the surrounding ground and crushing it into powder. Being in the center of that destructive force, Shenung suddenly felt like he was forced into a meat grinder. A terrifying twisting force acted on him, easily tearing apart his ultimate body that he was proud of and crushing the muscles and bones inside, which was extremely painful. Fortunately, he kept using the power of regeneration to restore his body. Otherwise, under the influence of that twisting force, he would have been a dead man now. When the light of the explosion dissipated, a huge deep pit of more than 10 meters was left on the ground. Shenung was lying in the center in an extremely unnatural twisted form. However, he still exuded a strong and powerful aura, and his twisted posture was recovering quickly, so no one would think he was dead. It's really troublesome that he can't die even after this. Minato frowned when he saw it. So what if he can't die now? You have already marked him with the Flying Thunder God seal. He can't even escape. He can only be slowly worn down by you bit by bit. Tsunade came over, crossed her arms, looked at Shenung in the pit and said coldly. As the granddaughter of the second generation Hokage Senjutsu Biruma, she naturally knew the characteristics of her grandfather's technique. The Flying Thunder God seal is a special mark with time and space attributes, which is completely different from common ninjutsu, so it is difficult, or even impossible to eliminate. After being marked by Minato Namikaze, Shenung couldn't even escape at this time. At the same time, after consuming a lot of Zero Tail's power, Shenung finally recovered from his injuries and stood up again. Damn it. The power of Zero Tail has been almost completely exhausted. Realizing his physical condition, he couldn't help but curse inwardly and then silently closed the 8 gates. Chapter 225 Uninvited Guests. Without the power of the Zero Tail to replace the consumption, Shenung had to overdraw his potential to maintain the 8 gates. What's worse is that this state of directly overdrawing oneself to open the 8 gates can no longer be closed freely. In other words, if he doesn't close the 8 gates now and waits until he starts to overdraw his potential, the result waiting for him is that his potential will be exhausted and he will die. As Shenung closed the 8 gates acupoints, the black chakra glow on his body also disappeared, and there was no longer the frightening oppressive aura just now. It seems that he has reached his limit, Tsunade said bluntly. Without the blessing of the 8 gates state, Shenung's strength is still very strong, but it is limited after all, and it will not be as terrible as before. In this case, I won't be polite. Minato exhaled a long breath of turbid air, spread out his right hand again, and a pale blue chakra light ball condensed. Originally, he wanted to try a few more times and observe the situation. But now that Shenung's strength has dropped sharply, he naturally has to seize the opportunity. Then, his figure disappeared from the spot, and he once again used the Flying Thunder God technique to appear in front of Shenung. Rasengan unceremoniously pressed the basketball-sized chakra energy bullet over. However, at this moment, a figure blocked Shenron at an extremely fast speed, and then opened his right hand and grabbed the Rasengan. What a fast speed, what a bold man. Seeing the sudden appearance of the enemy, Minato was secretly surprised, but he did not stop the attack, and continued to press the Rasengan over. Nether release, absorbing whole. Then, he was surprised to see that there were two overlapping diamond marks on the palm of the person's hand, and the upper diamond mark suddenly burst into a strange red light, and then his Rasengan was easily sucked in like a whale sucking water. What? Minato was shocked to see this weird scene. It was the first time he encountered such a situation. However, he was surprised by more than just this. Underworld release, evil self-destruction battle. The diamond-shaped mark below the palm of the visitor's hand suddenly glowed red, and then spurted out a chakra power that made him feel extremely familiar and powerful. Boom. In an instant, the gushing chakra power submerged Minato, and covered an area of nearly 10 meters in front. Seeing that the gravel and soil on the surface were turned into powder under the twisting force. However, when the impact dissipated, there was no body of Minato in front. The visitor turned around, looked to the side of Tsunade, smiled and said, as expected of the man known as the Golden Flash, this speed is indeed beyond the reach of ordinary people. He used the evil self-destruction to return the power of the Rasengan that he had just absorbed to attack Minato. Unfortunately, Minato reacted too quickly and used the Flying Thunder God technique to return to his previous foothold at the critical moment, so he did not actually hit the opponent. Your speed is also very fast. Don't underestimate yourself, Minato said as he looked at the other person with a serious face. At this time, he finally had time to look at the uninvited guest who suddenly appeared. The other person was short, but wore a large white high-collared jacket, which blocked half of his face. And behind the high collar, the other person's face was wrapped with a thick layer of bandages, and his identity could not be identified by facial image at all. However, although his identity could not be identified, Minato still recognized the strength of the person who came. To be able to block his attack at that moment, one can imagine how fast the other person was, which is definitely not something that ordinary people can do. More importantly, the other person also possesses a special ability to absorb ninjutsu and return ninjutsu, which also means that most ninjutsu may not be able to hurt the other person at all. Just these things that the other party showed were enough to make him alert. However, just because he didn't know the person who came, it didn't mean that others didn't know him either. Abiru, how come you are here? Tsunade frowned and said to the newcomer. That was a friend of the three ninjas when they were young. Later, he was wanted by the third generation for conducting taboo human research. Finally, he fled the village and became a rebel ninja. In the previous life, this guy also showed up and provoked trouble in order to obtain Kakashi's Sharingan. Konoha took a lot of effort to solve it, but I didn't expect that this guy would appear here now. Do you know Lady Tsunade? Minato was very surprised when he saw him. Yes. Tsunade nodded and then briefly recounted their past. Obito waved his hand and said, don't be nervous. I'm not here to cause trouble for Konoha this time. I just want to take someone away. As he said that, he gestured to Shenron beside him. Tsunade and the others were confused. Shenron was also confused because he didn't know Obito in front of him at all, and the two sides had no friendship. Although you just saved me once, it doesn't mean that I will thank you for it. Because that kind of attack can't kill me at all, he said coldly to the newcomer, and silently opened a small safe distance. I'm not trying to save you. Beliu looked at him coldly and said seriously, I just want to show you my strength and prove that I'm qualified to cooperate with you. Cooperation? Shenron was puzzled. Beliu did not explain, but glanced at Tsunade and the others vigilantly and continued, this is not the place to talk, let's leave here first. As he spoke, he walked towards Shenron again. He has the ultimate speed of swift escape, which can take people away at the fastest speed. However, Shenron did not trust him very much and was even more unwilling to contact a stranger casually, so he immediately stepped back. Seeing this, Beliu immediately said, you have been hit by the Flying Thunder God mark on your body by the Golden Flash, which cannot be eliminated by ordinary people. Moreover, he can also use that mark to lock your position, continuously launch attacks, and completely kill you bit by bit. If you don't want to die, you better leave here with me first. The Flying Thunder God technique that can cross space is very powerful, but it does not mean that Minato Namikaze can completely ignore the space distance, because all ninjutsu are created based on chakra. In other words, it also consumes chakra to cross space, as long as the space distance is pulled far enough, so far that the opponent can't bear the consumption of the technique. The opponent will naturally not be able to cast the Flying Thunder God technique to pursue. More importantly, the premise of casting the Flying Thunder God technique is to lock the Flying Thunder God mark as the space coordinate for guidance. Once the Flying Thunder God mark exceeds the perception range of the caster, the opponent will also be unable to perform a fixed point space crossing. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.